Chapter 396. It's actually just a horned, malformed horse. Cedric Diggory was embarrassed by the attention. After some thought, he suggested to Madame Hooch, as Hufflepuff captain, that Gryffindor and Hufflepuff should compete again in a few days. Cedric Diggory's magnanimity embarrassed Harry, Wood, and George. Despite their desire for victory, they had pride, so they turned down Cedric's offer with little hesitation. Madame Hooch, refereeing the match, confirmed the wishes of both sides and announced on the spot that Cedric Diggory had caught the golden snitch and ended the match, and that the result was valid and Hufflepuff won.
It's over, we're down by over 100 points. Unless Hufflepuff loses to Ravenclaw next, and we beat both Ravenclaw and Slytherin in a row, then we'll have some chance of winning.
Angelina sighed as she calculated the odds. It is not easy to pin one's chances on one's opponent's mistake, and Ravenclaw and Slytherin are both very strong. Fred tugged at Angelina's sleeve and shook his head at her, telling her to stop putting pressure on Harry.
Come on, Harry, you've never missed a snitch before, and this is just an accident. Everyone makes mistakes, and no one blames you.
George forced a smile and patted Harry on the shoulder reassuringly.
Right, one win is no big deal. There are 2 more games, aren't there? I'm sure you'll win in the end.
Ivan encouraged them. If he remembered correctly, it was still the Gryffindor team that won the Quidditch Cup in the original timeline. Ivan can't remember the exact process, but it seems unlikely that they will be crushed by this setback and will soon rally for a final victory. Harry's mood improved somewhat after being comforted by the crowd, although he was still upset about falling from the sky. George and Fred, on the other hand, seemed to remember something after Ivan finished speaking. They looked at each other, and their dull eyes suddenly lit up with hope. Both of them recalled Ivan's amazing flying and pitching skills. He could easily score 100 points in a match, let alone 100 points. Neither George nor Fred spoke, as Ivan had made it clear several times that he would not participate. There was a good chance Ivan would refuse if they asked him now, so they thought it best to discuss this with Wood and the others in private.
All right, everyone, calm down. I have something else to say.
Professor McGonagall's voice rang out across the Quidditch pitch, attracting everyone's attention. Professor McGonagall cleared her throat and addressed Ivan.
This Dementor riot was saved from possible casualties by the timely intervention of Hales, so I will give Gryffindor House 100 points.
When Professor McGonagall finished speaking, there was a brief silence as all eyes were on Ivan. The next moment, thunderous applause filled the Quidditch pitch. All the young wizards and witches from the various academies applauded with all their might. When hundreds of Dementors had been roaming over the Quidditch pitch, they had been deeply affected, and all joy had been stripped from them, leaving behind only painful memories. Ivan's powerful Patronus charm was like the light of dawn, saving them from pain and despair, so even the Slytherins applauded him. No one was happier than the young Gryffindor wizards, whose spirits had been swept away and whose palms were red from clapping. More people gathered around enthusiastically, asking questions at once.
Hales, what was the spell you used to defeat those creatures? I saw a glowing unicorn. Did you summon that? My God, that was beautiful. That's a Patronus charm, an advanced spell that only a few wizards can master. Many adult wizards don't know it.
A senior Slytherin said arrogantly. He was the one who released the Patronus Raven, which was in the form of a crow, to fight against the Dementors. However, the Patronus Raven was not as handsome as Ivan's unicorn, and its power was not worth mentioning.
Professor, I don't know why this is happening, so I always suspected it was just a deformed horse with horns.
Chapter 397, Because We're Friends. Ivan was well aware that the more times he used the unicorn's shadow, the more people would learn of the special nature of his Patronus, and the more he would not be able to hide it. Previously, he had deliberately kept it a secret mainly because he liked to hold back so that he could plot against others in the future.
So Dumbledore's phoenix-like Patronus was a Scottish pheasant with golden red feathers.
Professor McGonagall shook her head, understanding that Ivan didn't want to talk about it, so she didn't pursue the matter. Seeing the crowd of young witches and wizards gathered around Ivan, McGonagall left them to their business, not wanting to disturb them. Ivan was squeezed between a large number of enthusiastic young wizards and was having a hard time dealing with them. He had a headache answering all kinds of questions and could only use the excuse of having to go to the bathroom to sneak away.
I should have kept a low profile.
Yvonne reflected but soon decided that she had. It could only be said that no matter how much an outstanding person tried to hide, they would still be so dazzling.
Ivan, why are you here? Aren't you celebrating with them?
Behind her, Ivan heard a disembodied voice and turned to see Luna coming around a corner, holding a wooden sign. When she got closer, Yvonne could see that Luna was wearing Ravenclaw robes over a heavy coat. Due to the rain, the witch was dripping wet, but she did not seem to be suffering at all.
Celebrate, celebrate what? Our Gryffindor lost the game.
Ivan said helplessly.
But you saved everyone, didn't you? Without you, we'd have been bored to death by the Dementors.
Luna seemed to be in a trance, as if she were reliving the events that had transpired. Before Ivan could reply, Luna continued in frustration.
I wanted to thank you for driving them away, but so many people have done so.
Yvonne shook her head.
Yeah.
Luna said, pursing her lips in a smile, her lilting tone seeming to hum a tune. Ivan could not quite understand why Luna was so pleased. However, it soon occurred to him that the young witch did not seem to have many friends at school, and it was only 2 years later that she met Harry and his companions, which meant that he was probably her only friend now.
Clean it up.
As the incantation was spoken, a storm of magic blew up Luna's thick coat, and the remaining rain on it seemed to be pulled out of her body and gathered into a ball of water.
Is this a cleaning spell? I don't know how to do it yet.
Clean it up.
As the incantation was spoken, a storm of magic blew up Luna's thick coat, and the remaining rain on it seemed to be pulled out of her body and gathered into a ball of water. Is this a cleaning spell? I don't know how to do it yet, Luna whispered, looking at her dried clothes. She had not learned the spell in her second year. However, when she noticed that Ivan's clothes were also covered in dirt, Luna curiously removed her wand from behind her ear and cast the spell as Ivan had done. Clean it up. The magic stirred a breeze, but nothing else happened. Luna cocked her head and looked at Ivan in confusion.
You're going to need to adjust your hand gestures a little bit. I'll slow down and show you.
Ivan smiled and waved his wand to show Luna. They studied magic as they made their way back to the dormitory. Along the way, Luna showed off the wooden sign in her arms. Yvonne noticed that the wooden sign, in addition to the slogans he had seen before, depicted 2 tiny figures holding hands. Although it was done in the style of a sketch, it was very good, and Ivan could easily identify the 2 figures as himself and Luna.
How?
Luna asked gently, drawing a circle between the 2 little men with her wand in her right hand. The faint golden magic connected and formed a single word, friend. After showing it for a while, Luna put it back in her pocket and sighed.
It's just a pity I didn't use it.
Ivan looked at the drawing on the wooden tablet in a daze, and was even more amazed that Luna would go to the Forbidden Forest to make this. Perhaps sensing Ivan's thoughts, Luna quickly explained that she was going to the Forbidden Forest to find the crumple-horned Snorkek, and that she was just making this wooden tablet along the way. Even if it didn't work in the end, it could be hung in the dorm room for decoration, so Ivan didn't have to worry about it.
But there might be a chance to use it next year.
Luna said suddenly.
Yes, there will always be an opportunity.
Ivan nodded with a smile, but he knew that the Triwizard Tournament would not be held next year. There would be no Quidditch matches, and he was afraid that he would have to wait 2 years before he could use it.
Which came first, fire or phoenix?
Such a question, of course, could not stump Luna, who thought for a moment and then said,
Well,
Good point, correct answer.
The sound of the eagle knocker was heard again, and the door to the Ravenclaw lounge opened automatically. Ivan stared at the damn knocker, speechless. He remembered that when he answered the questions, it was not like this. Was there such a difference in treatment?
it's always stricter with outsiders.
Luna teased, laughing.
Forget it, I'm not going to argue with the knocker.
Ivan shook his head, deciding there was no point in sulking over a dead object.
Okay, that's enough for today. I have to get back.
Luna said, looking at the open door. Luna then seemed to remember something and looked back, her bright eyes fixed on Ivan's as she spoke again.
Also,
Chapter 398, Nasty Bronze Door Loops and Damaged Broomsticks. Luna's tone was sad, but she composed herself and entered the Ravenclaw lounge. The open bronze doors slide shut.
May I ask?
The sound of the bronze knocker interrupted Ivan's thoughts. Ivan rolled his eyes at the familiar question, pulled his wand out and put it back down. Resisting the urge to remove the knocker, he turned and walked away.
Ivan, where have you been? We've been waiting on the pitch for ages for you to come back.
Ron turned around when he heard the commotion outside the door.
You know I don't like crowds, they're too friendly.
Ivan explained, shaking his head. He then closed the door and entered the room, asking curiously.
What are you all doing here? We were looking at Harry's broom.
Ron reluctantly moved away from her. It was only then that Yvonne saw the remains of the broom lying on the table next to Harry's bed. Harry also looked devastated, as the Nimbus 2000 was a gift from Professor McGonagall to him when he joined the Quidditch team in his first year. Harry even remembers every time he caught the golden snitch on his broomstick, only to find that it was no longer with him. Crucially, their mortal enemy, the Slytherins, each had a Nimbus 2001, and if he were to ride an old comet broom, he would be at an absolute disadvantage in speed against Malfoy for the golden snitch. Ivan could only shake his head to show that there was nothing he could do. He did not know how to fix broomsticks. Given that the Firebolt Sirius sold to Harry should arrive in a day or two, Ivan tried to console Harry before turning his attention to Scabbers. The large rat was still very much alive and seemed to have no sense of danger, or perhaps it did not remember anything at all, as it lay on the edge of Ron's bed nibbling on a piece of flavored beans. Ivan nodded with satisfaction, but it was time to get to work on Peter. After all, waiting for Dumbledore to return was not a good idea. He thought he might be able to have a good chat with Lupin after his defense against the dark arts class tomorrow.
For this lesson, I'll show you how to deal with red caps. As you can see, they are rather elf-like in appearance. However, it should be noted that they do not possess the same intelligence as elves and are quite violent in nature, preferring to lurk in places where blood has been shed.
May I ask?
In short, the secret to dealing with them is not to be afraid. As long as you can overcome your fear, you will find that the red hat is actually easy to deal with.
Lupin reminded them. Most magical creatures in the wizarding world are of little threat to a prepared wizard, or wizards would not be rulers of the wizarding world.
Hales, why don't you demonstrate for us this time?
Lupin asked Ivan. Ivan nodded and moved to the center. Lupin shouted for them to stand back, then waved his wand to release the ropes binding the red cap. The hideous goblin-like creature broke free from its bonds and charged at Ivan, who was closest to it. For Ivan, such a small scene was naturally easy to deal with, and when the red cap got closer, Ivan accurately predicted his movements and casually raised his hand.
Petrify them all.
The spell's light hit the red hat and froze it in place. The red hat's face was still twisted and hideous.
Great petrifaction charm, 5 extra points for Gryffindor.
Lupin announced as he came forward, clapping his hands.
See, it's not that hard to deal with if you keep calm.
The young witches and wizards who had seen how easily Ivan had subdued the red caps were now eager to get on with the task. Considering that there were so many students attending the same class, it would be impossible to finish the class in a one-on-one. Lupin left Ivan to serve as his teaching assistant for the time being, overseeing the fight between the young Gryffindor wizards and the red caps. Lupin was very confident in Ivan's abilities. The previous evening, he had heard that Ivan had driven off hundreds of Dementors that had broken into the school and saved the entire school.
Harry Malfoy, now it's your turn.
Chapter 399, Lupin, oh no, I might not survive today.
All set.
Lupin asked loudly, and when Harry and Malfoy both nodded, he released a red cap from its cage. Ivan also disarmed his petrifaction charm at the same time, restoring the other red cap to full mobility. The red caps, having been cast with the confounding charm, lost all sense of their surroundings and were unable to see the wizards surrounding them. Harry and Malfoy had previously witnessed Ivan's ease of spell casting, but now that they were facing him in person, they realized that the creature was not to be trifled with. Although the red cap was not very tall and could only hit them on the shoulder when he jumped, the wild, seemingly fearless look on his face frightened the two of them.
Stupefy.
Harry nervously followed Ivan's example and cast the spell. A magical beam of light shot out, but it missed and hit the wall behind the red cap. It was not easy for Harry to hit a fast-moving target due to his lack of combat experience, not to mention the fact that the red caps were small and quite a distance away.
Harry, don't panic, keep your distance.
Ivan was advising Harry on how to find the right moment. Harry made a mental note to keep his nerves in check and calmly waited for the red cap to approach before he cast the stunning spell again. A brilliant red light shone from the tip of the wand. This time, it hit its target. The running red cap stumbled and fell to the ground. Malfoy, on the other hand, was flustered. Despite Lupin's advice on how to cast the spell to banish the red cap, Malfoy, who already had a problem with Lupin, was not prepared to deal with it the way Lupin wanted him to. He cast a dark spell of unknown origin, which, coupled with a bit of luck, hit the red hat in the chest. Malfoy, however, apparently overestimated his own magical abilities. Instead of being knocked off his feet, the cursed red cap charged at Malfoy in a fit of rage. Malfoy panicked and cast two spells, one of which missed and the other blew off the red cap's right arm. However, the red cap, who had lost an arm, charged at Malfoy, his face contorted and his mouth full of tears.
Help me.
As Lupin's gentle voice rang out, a burst of light hit the red cap, and he was frozen in an attacking position in front of Malfoy. The red cap's right arm was dripping blood, and the claw on his left arm was only a dozen centimeters away from reaching Malfoy's arm. Malfoy, still in shock, turned red and then white. He looked at Lupin angrily, thinking that Lupin must have wanted to see him make a fool of himself, so he waited until the last moment to save him. Lupin did not care much for Malfoy's attitude, pointing out the mistakes Malfoy made during the fight and encouraging him to try again. Malfoy impatiently returned to his original position, but this time he didn't try to fool around and followed Lupin's instructions to cast the spell. Malfoy felt a sense of accomplishment when he saw the strong enemy, Red Cap, running around in a panic after losing his target and crashing into the wall. Malfoy felt awkward when he remembered that he had been taught by Lupin. After Harry and Malfoy defeated the Red Caps, more and more wizards volunteered to try. Unlike fighting a fearsome creature like the boggart, the Red Hat was fierce-looking, but it was actually a magical beast that could cause harm. This thrill was very novel to these young wizards who had never experienced a life-and-death battle. Some young wizards even mistakenly thought that this was a real battle, and after winning, they proudly bragged that they were very calm and unafraid of battle. However, about one-third of these wizards were in trouble during their first encounter with the Red Cap. When it was Seamus's turn, he was so anxious that he cast a spell on Neville, who was standing nearby. If Ivan hadn't reacted in time and cast an armor charm on poor Neville, he would have been hit.
Professor Lupin's class was brilliant. Last time it was Boggart, this time it was Red Hat. I wonder what's next. He's the best defense against the dark arts professor I've ever seen.
The young wizards were all talking at once, and Lupin naturally heard them. He smiled faintly and sighed. These months at Hogwarts were arguably his most relaxed and happiest in years. There was no discrimination, a good meal and a handsome salary. It was not even a task for him to teach, as it was a joy to be able to interact with these mischievous and interesting students, and he hoped that his identity would never be discovered. After returning to his office from the classroom, Lupin took out the wolfsbane potion from his wizard robes and prepared to drink it. Calculating the time, the full moon should be in the next few days. It would be better to drink it early to be safe.
Come on in. Hello, Professor Lupin.
Chapter 400. I didn't expect my identity to be seen through so quickly. Ever since learning of Ivan's deeds at Hogwarts, Lupin had been in a state of anxiety for a long time, fearing that Ivan would one day expose him as a werewolf and throw him out of Hogwarts. Especially after Snape had plotted against him a few days ago and shown off the wolfsbane potion in front of Ivan, Lupin became even more uneasy. Having lived through such a relaxed and enjoyable teaching life, he naturally did not want to return to his former life of being homeless and starving. Fortunately, Ivan did not trouble him for the next few days, a discovery that made Lupin feel relieved. He assumed that Ivan had not discovered his identity and acted more naturally. Unfortunately, it turned out that what would come would come. From the action of locking the door, it was not difficult to see that the young wizard in front of him was obviously up to no good.
Hales, why have you come to see me?
Professor Lupin, there's something I'd like to talk to you about in private. Oh.
Yvonne thought it would be nice to use the term since they were talking about the Marauders map and Peter. Hearing this familiar title, Lupin felt as if he had fallen into an ice cellar. He did not expect Ivan to find out about this. Lupin no longer took any chances. After all, the name Moonface was based on his werewolf traits. Since Ivan had revealed his secret identity in an attempt to show that he knew everything there was to know about him, the anti-locked door was naturally meant to prevent him from escaping. Lupin sighed at the thought and spoke.
Hales, I didn't think you'd find out who I was so quickly. You really are the best student Hogwarts has ever had, as everyone says, but...
Lupin did not hate Ivan when his cover was blown. A werewolf as a professor is somewhat inappropriate, not only for frightened students and worried parents, but also for himself, who sometimes worries about losing control and injuring someone. Therefore, even if he knew that he would lose his job because of this, Lupin would not blame Ivan. After all, the young wizard was only doing what he was supposed to do. However, there was one thing that Lupin could not understand. How could Ivan dare to come into the office of a werewolf professor alone when he knew Lupin was a werewolf? Fighting a werewolf in a confined space is not a good idea. Was it absolute confidence in his own strength? Lupin couldn't help but think of the two previous defense against the dark arts professors who had been driven away. He didn't know if they would suffer the same fate as he did, but it was clear that not every one of them would go down without a fight. From the looks of it, Ivan did have the right to be proud. If they really fought, he might not be able to beat this little wizard.
What are you talking about, Professor?
Ivan asked Lupin, who was holding a large suitcase and seemed to be packing to go. It didn't take long for Ivan to guess what he was thinking, and he didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he continued.
If you're referring to the issue of werewolf status, you can relax. I'm not here to talk about that.
Lupin paused in his packing and looked at Ivan in confusion, unsure of what Ivan meant. Why did you lock the door if you're not here to blow your cover and chase me away? From Ivan's words, Lupin could tell that the young wizard in front of him already knew he was a werewolf wizard.
Professor Lupin, if you've read last year's Daily Prophet, you'll understand that I don't have a bad opinion of werewolf wizards. On the contrary, I have many werewolf friends, and the idea of making a werewolf poison came to me when I learned of their plight.
Ivan spoke frankly, and in case Lupin was surprised every time he saw him, Ivan thought it would be best to talk about it now. Hearing this, Lupin's heart finally relaxed. Before taking up his post as professor at Hogwarts, he had to scrimp on food and lodging, so how could he afford to order every issue of the Daily Prophet? He learned of the wolfsbane potion by letter from Dumbledore. This, combined with his experiences in the wizarding world over the years and his battle record of driving out two defense against the dark arts professors, made Lupin wary of Ivan. Recalling how he had deliberately avoided Ivan in order to hide his identity as a werewolf wizard, Lupin smiled bitterly. He had never expected Ivan to have known about his identity, but he had never told him. Lupin adjusted his emotions and asked curiously,
Hales, since it's not about my status, why did you come to see me today? And how did you know the name Moonface?
Yvonne did not answer him directly. Instead, she took a worn parchment from the pocket of her wizarding robe and placed it on the table. Lupin's eyes were drawn to the parchment, and his eyes shone with surprise and nostalgia. After a long while, he looked back at Ivan and smiled.
What a coincidence, I didn't think you'd have it. No wonder you know the name Moonface. You seem to have cracked its secret.
No, it wasn't me. George and Fred cracked it.
Yvonne shook her head, taking no credit.
George and Fred, the Weasley twins, I was impressed with their performance in class.
He had a soft spot for George and Fred, who were often mischievous in class, as they often reminded him of his adventures with James and Peter. Without pausing, Ivan added,
As for the significance of several titles, I learned that much from their makers.
Lupin's smile froze and he frowned at Ivan.
You said you found out from the other producers.
Chapter 401, do you want to hear another story?
The other producer, who, James? No, it can't be him.
When Ivan finished speaking, Lupin's face was filled with shock and excitement. There are only 4 makers of the Marauders map, and since Ivan says he didn't get the information from Sirius, that leaves James and Peter. He learned that James was killed by the you-know-who's Avada Kedavra. After you-know-who's downfall, Lupin attended James and Lily's funeral and saw their bodies, so James couldn't have come back from the dead.
Hales, do you have any proof that Peter is alive?
Despite his suspicions, Lupin found this hard to believe. After all, if Peter was alive and well, why would he hide? Where had he been hiding all these years? Lupin wondered if Ivan was lying, or if he too had been tricked.
Proof, it's on this map.
Ivan pointed at the Marauders map, then tapped his wand on the blank parchment and read the secret code.
I solemnly swear I did no good.
Fine lines of ink emerged from the blank parchment and spread like a spider's web across every corner of the parchment, forming a dynamic map on which one name after another appeared. After so many years, Lupin could no longer be bothered to be emotional when he heard this familiar code name. He stared at the map and soon saw a familiar name. Peter Pettigrew.
He's really alive, but...
Lupin was completely lost. As one of the makers of the Marauders map, he knew exactly how powerful it was. Now that the name was there, it proved that Peter was in the Gryffindor dormitory, alive and well and with Harry.
I'm sure you know something about what happened in the first place, but would you like to hear a different version of the story? The one I tortured out of Peter and confirmed with Sirius Black.
Ivan suggested. Lupin thought for a moment and nodded solemnly. When he confirmed that Peter was alive, he knew that what had happened back then must have been more complicated than he had imagined. Ivan was surprised at Lupin's cooperation. He thought he would have to waste some time convincing him or even beat Lupin into a pulp. However, it made sense. Lupin knew more about Sirius and Peter than he did. In the original timeline, Lupin did not even need to be told. He could already guess Peter's name from the Marauders map. With this in mind, Ivan decided to let the cat out of the bag and told them about Peter Pettigrew's revelation about Lord Voldemort's death.
Wait a minute, did you just say that Peter gave away the location of James's house to you-know-who? But if I remember correctly, Sirius was the secret keeper, and James and Sirius told me so themselves.
Lupin interrupted Ivan with a frown.
Yes, at first, but Black decided he was too conspicuous, so he had an idea.
He will be the obvious target to attract the attention of the Death Eaters and the Dark Lord, and another trusted friend to serve as the true secret keeper.
Explained Ivan.
That's Peter Pettigrew,
Sighed Lupin, having got the message. No wonder Sirius went after Peter after James was killed by you-know-who. However, Lupin wondered why Sirius had been arrested by the Aurors of the Ministry of Magic without a word of protest. In response to Lupin's doubts, Ivan thought about Sirius's behavior in the past and guessed.
He must have decided that he trusted the wrong person and indirectly killed his best friend, so he became so disheartened that he believed he was partly to blame and was willing to be punished by entering Azkaban.
Lupin nodded thoughtfully, thinking that Sirius must have believed Peter to be dead at the time, and that the fall of the you-know-who meant that Sirius was the only one who was responsible for James's death. From what he knew of Black, it was only natural that he would be willing to accept punishment under the weight of his own self-blame.
By the way, Professor Lupin, why didn't you let Professor Dumbledore be the secret keeper in the first place?
Yvonne asked. Ivan had never understood this, and if the Fidelius charm was so powerful that only the secret keeper could reveal its weakness, why not ask Dumbledore to keep it a secret? This way, Harry's parents won't have to die.
Because there is a limit to how many secrets a wizard can keep. Otherwise, there could be conflict, and your headmaster Dumbledore already had a secret to keep in the first place.
Lupin explained vaguely. Was it because Dumbledore wanted to keep the Order's location a secret? The idea occurred to Ivan, and it dawned on him.
Well, enough of that. Now that we've found the real traitor, we can clear Sirius's name. There's no time to lose. We'd better move now.
Lupin was clearly agitated. Since James's death, Lupin thought he had lost 3 of his best friends in a row, 2 dead and 1 betrayed. How could Lupin not be furious when Black was innocent and Peter, the man responsible for James's death, was alive and well?
Professor Lupin, you'd better calm down.
Ivan had to interrupt Lupin's reverie.
There's too much at stake with Sirius in prison, and the Ministry will most likely get in the way, so we'd better wait until Professor Dumbledore gets back.
Chapter 402, Coach.
Well, as you say, we'll have to tread carefully, but even so, we should arrest Peter first. It's too dangerous to keep him with Harry.
Upon learning that Peter was now Ron's pet in his rat form, Lupin became worried. It was Gryffindor's dormitory, and it was full of young wizards and witches. If Peter got angry, there would be terrible consequences.
I used the memory charm on Peter to make him forget things he shouldn't remember. Peter has been a rat for more than 10 years, so unless he's pushed too far or his life is in danger, he's unlikely to suddenly fly into a rage.
Ivan shook his head and explained that Peter could not reveal himself as long as he wanted to live. Then Ivan continued.
I have a plan for Peter's location before Professor Dumbledore's return. I'm already working on the cage that will hold Peter. It will only take a few days.
Ivan knew all too well how cunning and forbearing Peter could be. Once Peter became alarmed, it would not be easy to keep him under control. The only way to be safe was to put a stunning charm on Peter several times a day, but Ivan was still a little worried that Peter would starve to death. Therefore, he was more inclined to use the same method Barty Crouch Jr. used to imprison Mad-Eye Moody, to create a cage for him to be locked in and watched over by someone else, or to carry it around with him. Ivan had Dobby purchase the ingredients for the cage, and it would be ready in a few days. According to Ivan's calculations, it would be just in time for Harry and Sirius to meet, after which he could simply put Peter in a cage and leave him in Sirius' care. Ivan told Lupin the rest of his plan, and Lupin thought for a moment before speaking.
Hales, if you have a plan, follow it. Let me know if you need any help.
Ivan's plan had been well thought out, and Lupin could not think of a better way to deal with it. Changing it at the last minute could lead to mistakes. However, looking at the 13-year-old wizard in front of him, Lupin was impressed. Ivan was better than he had expected. He was able to use a marauder's map to discover Peter, who had been hiding for many years, and boldly contact Sirius to find out the truth. It was even possible to take into account the Ministry's next moves and plan accordingly, a feat of intelligence and skill that Lupin would have found hard to imagine in an underage wizard. The two of them discussed for a while and agreed on some details before Ivan left. After convincing Lupin with unusual ease, Ivan felt refreshed. It was not easy to find someone to talk to about a secret that had been locked away for so long. On the way back to the Gryffindor lounge from the professor's office, Ivan was shocked by what he saw when he opened the door. Wood, George, and the others were dressed in golden-red Quidditch robes, including Harry. They were all holding brooms and looked ready to go to war. When Ivan opened the door, George and Fred greeted him happily, patting him on the shoulder.
Hales, we've been waiting for you. You're finally back.
Ivan explained. He then looked at their neat clothes and couldn't help but complain.
What's the matter with you guys, trying to play Quidditch in the lounge? No, we just think it's more ceremonial.
George said solemnly, shaking his head.
Yes, I think it will remind you of what it was like to fight alongside everyone last year.
Fred tried to look serious. Harry and the others looked embarrassed, as they felt they should never have agreed to George and Fred's apparently nonsensical suggestion, but it was too late to back out. Therefore, they could only bite the bullet and speak to Ivan despite the gazes of the young wizards in the lounge.
Hales.
The Gryffindor players tried to calm him down, and Ivan had a strange expression on his face. He wanted to complain, but seeing how serious everyone was, he swallowed his words.
Ivan, after everything we've talked about, don't you feel your blood boiling and your body on fire?
George asked when Ivan didn't respond. It took him and Fred a long time to come up with such an emotional method of persuasion, and a long time to convince everyone to go through with the plan. At this moment, Captain Wood pulled George and the others away and walked straight to Ivan. He placed his hands on Ivan's shoulders and spoke excitedly.
Hales, this is a most desperate time. Gryffindor needs you.
Well, as you say, we'll have to tread carefully, but even so, we should arrest Peter first. It's too dangerous to keep him with Harry. Upon learning that Peter was now Ron's pet in his rat form, Lupin became worried. It was Gryffindor's dormitory, and it was full of young wizards and witches. If Peter got angry, there would be terrible consequences.
I'm sorry.
Chapter 403, It Must Be from Dumbledore. Fred shamelessly threw his arms around Ivan's legs and refused to let go, crying falsely and declaring that if Ivan didn't agree, Wood would drown in the Black Lake tomorrow.
All right, stop.
Ivan was really annoyed, so he could only say helplessly. George, Wood, and the others did not dare to push him too hard, and when they saw that Ivan was willing to back down and consider the matter, they stopped. However, before leaving, Wood kept hinting to Harry to do more thinking for Ivan.
Sigh.
Ivan sighed, returning to the dormitory with a headache. Ron looked on with envy, unable to understand why Ivan was troubled. He would jump for joy if Wood, George, and the others ever invited him to join the Quidditch team. He would have to win the Quidditch Cup even if he did not have to attend class. What an honor. Ron fantasized about opening the door and entering his room, but his attention was caught by the package by the window. Ron took a few quick steps forward.
What's this? Who sent this? Is it an early Halloween present?
It was a beautiful package, over a meter long, bound in golden red ribbons with a card dangling from the bottom, addressed to Mr. Harry Potter in black ink.
Harry, it looks like it's for you. It looks weird. It doesn't even have the sender's name on it.
Ron called out to him. Harry was confused as to who would send something to him at a time like this, as the packaging looked expensive. Curious, Harry unwrapped the box and opened it, then froze, staring at the contents as if possessed. Ron was surprised by his reaction, and when he looked inside the box, he gasped.
Am I seeing this right? This is a firebolt. Who gave it to you?
Ron asked after a while as he regained his composure.
How should I know?
Harry was stunned, pleasantly surprised, and wondering who would give him something so valuable. The Dursleys, that's impossible, they hate me.
This.
Ron stammered. Ivan was equally surprised. Had Sirius accidentally filled in the wrong amount to buy a broom and sent Harry 2 firebolts?
It looks like it's for you this time, Ivan.
Harry said when he saw the package. As expected, the owl dropped the package in front of Ivan and flew away. Bewildered, Ivan opened the package, which, unlike Harry's, contained a letter in addition to a firebolt. Ivan opened the envelope and read the contents, before realizing that Sirius had purchased the firebolt to thank him for his help. In Sirius's words, he was going to buy Harry a firebolt anyway, so he didn't mind buying another one.
I don't care if you buy another one.
In the face of something like a firebolt, Harry and Ron leaned forward to check the contents of the envelope, but Yvonne grabbed it first. Although the letter only mentioned thanking him, and not much in the way of specifics, it was possible to guess something if one was smart enough to read it and knew Sirius well. After all, there weren't many people with that much money who still had contact with Harry.
Ivan, who the hell sent these 2 packages?
Harry asked. He was both pleased and disturbed that he had somehow acquired a firebolt, and he wanted to know.
Yes, what did the letter say?
Ron was curious. Yvonne glanced at Scabbers, who was eavesdropping on Ron, and said,
This letter is from Professor Dumbledore, who is very worried about Harry's safety after learning that Harry accidentally fell out of the air while playing basketball and broke his broomstick.
Chapter 404, Ron, I don't believe it. Professor Dumbledore can't be so biased. Ivan's words silenced Harry, and he felt the weight of the firebolt in his bag as he touched it. He did not expect Professor Dumbledore to be so concerned about him while he was away. Harry was moved, tears welling up in his eyes, and he made a silent decision not to let Professor Dumbledore down. He must overcome his fear of Dementors and win this year's Quidditch Cup. Ron looked at Harry with envy and added the invisibility cloak, which Professor Dumbledore had anonymously given Harry for the second time. However, looking at the broomstick in front of Ivan, Ron asked curiously,
Then why did Professor Dumbledore send you a firebolt?
Before Ivan could speak, Harry said speculatively,
This must be Professor Dumbledore's reward for Ivan. After all, he saved so many lives on the Quidditch pitch.
Harry then turned to look at Ivan, who he thought was a much better flyer than he was. When Harry first heard of Ivan's withdrawal from the Quidditch team, he was quite disappointed, believing that Professor Dumbledore's gift of the firebolt must have had a similar meaning.
Well, yes, that's exactly what Harry said.
Ivan nodded with an odd expression as Harry and Ron looked at each other. Everything he had just said had been made up on the spot, and he had not expected Harry to not only continue the lie he had made up, but also somehow make sense. This made Ivan want to curse.
You're a better liar than me.
Ivan then added, as if remembering something.
By the way, Professor Dumbledore didn't want anyone else to know, or the other teams would have called him biased.
Harry and Ron nodded. They certainly understood this and promised to keep their mouths shut. Ivan saw that they agreed readily, so he did not say anything more and split some of his attention to check on Scabbers. The gray-black rat, no longer nervous, returned to Ron's pocket without interest. All it heard from Harry Potter and the others was
Dumbledore buying 2 expensive-looking brooms for a battered Harry and a well-performed Ivan.
Which was not worth caring about. Ron, however, was not going to give up. He looked at the firebolt on the table with envy.
Harry, Ivan, do you think Professor Dumbledore might have bought each of us a firebolt?
Harry was at a loss for words, unsure how to respond for fear of undermining Ron's confidence.
You wish.
Ron did not have the necessary merits, was not Sirius's godson, and was, at best, a friend of Harry's, so getting his hands on a firebolt was a pipe dream, and Sirius would never be such a spendthrift, no matter how rich he was.
Ivan, can you teach me how to fight off Dementors?
What's the matter? You haven't been to Professor Lupin's these past few days.
Ivan was surprised. He remembered reminding Harry of this.
I've tried, but Professor Lupin doesn't seem to be in good health recently. He said that he won't be free for a while, and Professor Lupin also said that you know more about the Patronus charm than he does, so he'll just ask you to learn it.
Harry said helplessly.
Is that so?
Ivan raised her eyebrows, but she soon realized that Lupin's refusal to admit that he was ill was probably because he was too anxious and worried about the upcoming full moon to give Harry special treatment.
Well, if you want to believe in my teaching skills, I can certainly teach you.
Ivan agreed after a moment's thought. He thought it would be a good opportunity to explain Peter to Harry, in case there was a misunderstanding when Harry and Sirius met.
Don't count your chickens before they hatch.
Ivan said sternly.
I don't have as much teaching experience as Professor Lupin, and my teaching methods may be rough. You have to be prepared. Rough?
Despite his concern, Harry nodded solemnly, indicating that he would go through with it no matter how hard it was.
So when do we start?
Harry asked eagerly, eager to learn how to deal with Dementors.
I need to prepare some props, so let's set it for tomorrow evening. As for tonight, just familiarize yourself with the spell.
Ivan said, then demonstrated to Harry.
Expecto Patronus.
Chapter 405. How many steps do you need to take to kidnap a Dementor? The next afternoon, after the last lesson, Ivan moved out of the way of the crowd and up to the potions room on the 8th floor.
Dobby.
Ivan snapped his fingers out of habit. The next moment, the loyal house elf appeared in front of him with a sack in her hand.
What you asked me to buy, sir?
Yes, very well, go about your business.
Ivan nodded. Dobby placed the sack on the table and disappeared into the room of requirement. After Dobby left, Ivan took out a bottle of basilisk blood and a dedicated quill from the cupboard and prepared to insulate the sack with runes. Apart from being able to be used to create magical tools, he was also able to temporarily imbue ordinary objects with certain properties. However, magical objects are often used as carriers in the drawing of magical texts, and magical creatures' blood is a natural choice. It just so happened that when he killed the basilisk last year, he collected a large amount of snake blood, some of which he kept and did not sell, making it convenient for him to draw runes. The blood of a 1,000-year-old basilisk contained a large amount of magic, and even if it was limited to one Dementor, it would be enough to keep the enchantment active for half a month, long enough for Harry to learn the Patronus charm. Drawing runes took less effort than creating a magical tool, especially for Ivan, who had reached level 6 in alchemy. In just 10 minutes or so, complicated patterns appeared on the surface of the sack, and the magical fluorescence began to show and die down. Satisfied, Ivan dropped the quill, tidied up, rolled up the sack and stuffed it inside his robes and left the room of requirement. Alone in a secluded area outside Hogwarts Castle, Ivan looked around to make sure no one was around before resorting to his bloodline magic, boggart transformation. The magic in her body surged, filling her, and the next thing Ivan knew, his body was melting and twisting, rising higher and higher, and a black mist was coming out of him. What worried Ivan the most was the fact that his eyes were losing their light and being covered by a thick cocoon. However, perhaps due to his poor form, he was able to retain part of his vision, although he was able to see vaguely as well as at a high level. Fortunately, while his vision was affected, his other senses were being amplified, and he acquired a special ability to sense his surroundings without the use of his eyes.
Stop.
Suddenly, a hoarse voice cut through the silence, startling Ivan. Ivan looked around and saw several Dementors floating down from the sky. It seemed that these Dementors were responsible for the sudden noise. The Dementors drifted down and swirled around Ivan, and the air grew colder.
Don't.
Chapter 406, How to Pack a Dementor and Take It Away.
Work.
With the wind in Ivan's ears and the Dementors pushing against him, Ivan had no choice but to give up on the idea of finding his target and follow the Dementors on their patrol over the castle. During the journey, Ivan was busy trying to communicate with the evil creatures and gather information. After some questioning, Ivan was able to gain a better understanding of the Dementors' community. These monsters were not as chaotic as he had originally thought. Not only could they communicate with each other, but they could also work together against enemies and even discuss tactics. However, he was not very intelligent, being around the age of a few years old, and his mind was a mess. All he could think about was what to do, and occasionally complained about the Ministry's inhumane treatment. They missed Azkaban more than they did Hogwarts. There is plenty of food, and Azkaban is a perfect playground for them, apart from the fact that they cannot simply execute prisoners and suck their souls. Ivan did not wait for the other party to ask, but imitated the Dementor's chaotic and intermittent tones. The Dementor didn't seem to doubt Ivan's words. Instead, it floated eagerly towards him, knowing exactly what a prisoner represented. This meant that delicious food could be enjoyed at will, especially by criminals as heinous as Sirius Black, who would not be punished by the Ministry for eating each other's souls.
Just you wait.
Ivan said, looking around cautiously. When he saw that no one was around, he reached into his cloak and pulled out a large sack.
That's a bit too easy.
Were Dementors not wary of their own kind? Yvonne thought that was likely, since these simple creatures seemed to only get into trouble when it came to feeding on wizards' emotions, and were usually quite happy to stick together.
Well, if it isn't Umbridge, what's she doing here?
Yvonne turned to see Professor McGonagall coming around the corner, accompanied by a stout middle-aged witch in a pink floral dress. Yvonne instantly recognized the middle-aged witch, who was none other than Umbridge, whom she had met 2 years ago.
You're saying the Dementors broke into the school in defiance of Ministry regulations.
She looked surprised but quickly shook her head and continued.
Never, these Dementors are employed by the Ministry of Magic and would never dare to enter the castle without orders, let alone attack the students there.
Professor McGonagall asked, raising her eyebrows.
All the students at Hogwarts can testify to that, and I'm sure the Ministry of Magic has received letters from the students' parents recently.
Chapter 407. We are just a bunch of brutal, emotionless soul-sucking machines. When McGonagall suggested evacuating the Dementors, Umbridge's eyes widened in disbelief, and she looked at her in astonishment.
My God, how can you think that? What if the Dementors are withdrawn and the children at Hogwarts are no longer under their protection? What if Black gets in?
He's been in there once already, sneaking into the castle, right under the noses of these Dementors.
McGonagall interrupted Umbridge, ignoring her livid expression as she spoke again.
As for the safety of the children, it will be up to us professors.
Umbridge adamantly disagreed with the removal of the Dementors from the castle, insisting that the Dementors were subservient to the Ministry's authority, and that the Ministry should at most assign extra supervision. Moreover, Umbridge suspected that McGonagall was exaggerating the severity of the situation. How could a third-year wizard have driven off 100 Dementors that broke into the castle? If there were only a few Dementors.
How about we ask these Dementors?
McGonagall had a strange expression on her face. Ask the Dementors, ask them to report her. Umbridge approached the Dementor, and McGonagall had no choice but to follow.
I am a high-ranking member of the Ministry of Magic. Some say that you invaded Hogwarts Quidditch pitch 2 days ago. Is that correct? Or did you accidentally discover Black's whereabouts at the castle and accidentally enter the premises?
Umbridge adopted a businesslike manner and questioned him, but her words were full of hints. As a high-ranking member of the Ministry of Magic, Umbridge was naturally aware that Dementors were not as chaotic and mindless as they were rumored to be, and were, in fact, highly intelligent creatures who understood and carried out orders. So the choice is obvious.
Not if you're the former, just shake your head if you're trespassing.
McGonagall frowned. What could she possibly get out of him? However, to their astonishment, the Dementor nodded obediently.
I am saying that if you break into Hogwarts Quidditch pitch against the Ministry's rules, you will be severely punished. However, if you do so by mistake because you are pursuing Black, the Ministry may consider letting bygones be bygones.
Umbridge would kill all the Dementors who caused this mess if she could. However, it was not easy to find a group of free, obedient creatures, so Umbridge had to bite the bullet and give the Dementor another chance. To Umbridge's despair, however, the Dementor nodded even faster.
So you entered the stadium to attack the students there, suck their joy, and even devour their souls.
Yes, 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 we're just a bunch of brutal, emotionless soul-sucking machines. Ivan nodded again, very honestly. This time, even Professor McGonagall was speechless. She originally thought that the Dementors were evil and cruel creatures that were bound to be extremely cunning, but she did not expect that they were actually a group of simple-minded people who would say everything.
I think we've made ourselves clear, haven't we, Umbridge?
Said Professor McGonagall. Umbridge was shaking, her chest heaving, and she was furious. Who the hell told her Dementors were magical creatures of considerable intelligence? They were a bunch of idiots.
Right, I think it's clear enough. So you Dementors broke Ministry regulations by acting on your own and attempting to attack the students in the castle.
Umbridge spoke through gritted teeth, angrily pulling out her wand and pointing it at Ivan.
Expecto Patronum, expecto Patronum.
The next moment, a white light appeared and sent the Dementor flying.
Ministry of Magic investigators beating up Dementors.
Chapter 408, Dementors Will Never Be Slaves. Hearing Ivan's desperate cries, countless Dementors gathered around him, asking questions.
What?
Large numbers of Dementors gathered, and the sound of the wind in Ivan's ears was transformed into broken words. In response to the Dementors' questions, Ivan feigned outrage and replied,
Why else, because of our previous trespass on the Quidditch pitch, the Ministry's special investigator is prepared to punish us all with the harshest of punishments.
Ivan's words caused an uproar among the Dementors, who began to panic. Just because they ignored the Ministry's rules when they broke the rules doesn't mean they aren't afraid of the Ministry's methods. Instead, they know that they are no match for those wizards. It was on this basis that the Dementors were willing to take orders from the Ministry. The occasional loss of control was due to their chaotic nature and their desire to absorb pleasure, temporarily overriding their fear of the ministry. Ivan was speechless at the sight of the Dementors. If you're so scared of the Ministry of Magic, why didn't you do it earlier? However, in order to cause some chaos so that he could escape and not be caught, Ivan shouted.
Be quiet, everyone, please listen to me.
All of the Dementors, who had been thrown into chaos and panic, stopped to stare at their strange-looking compatriot. They had never seen anyone with such a clear mind before, so they looked curiously at Ivan. Ivan continued to shout.
Are we going to continue to be oppressed by the ministry? I hope no one has forgotten that it was never our fault.
It was the Ministry of Magic that restricted our personal freedom and forced us to carry out pointless patrols. Did they give any thought to our feelings? No, they never cared what we thought or even intended to give us any food.
What?
I have a dream.
What?
I declare.
Ivan was full of nonsense as he babbled on, piecing together the propaganda he had heard from various sources in his previous life and passing it on to the Dementors. Any wizard or muggle in their right mind might have thrown him off the stage.
What do you want? I'm the High Inquisitor for the Ministry of Magic. Get back on patrol.
Umbridge used her status as an inquisitor for the Ministry of Magic in an attempt to scare off the Dementors. Unfortunately for Umbridge, the Dementors around her were either overcome by rage or inspired by Ivan's attempt to fight for their race.
Be careful, our enemy is that short, fat wizard down there, the one who just hit me. Don't hit the wrong person.
Ivan, the instigator, considered his Dementor form to be mediocre in combat, so he did not enter the fray himself. Instead, he floated in the air to cheer on his
Companions.
guiding them away from McGonagall and towards Umbridge. Of course, Ivan was not worried about Professor McGonagall's safety. He was just reminding the Dementors not to get themselves killed. Although there were a lot of evil creatures, they were troublesome to deal with for Professor McGonagall.
Expecto Patronum, Expecto Patronum.
Chapter 409, Unity is Strength, Perseverance is Victory. The Patronus is made of a substance that represents a positive force within a wizard and happens to be food for Dementors. However, under normal circumstances, the Patronus formed by a wizard was extremely solid and would not be easily broken. However, Umbridge's fragile mind was not strong enough to support her Patronus against a large number of Dementors, and thus she was able to break down easily. After successfully breaking the Patronus charm's protection, the Dementors were so excited that they rushed to Umbridge's side and sucked her courage and hope out of her with their empty mouths.
Praise God.
Wisps of white light drifted from the tip of her wand, but she was unable to reform her Patronus. One of the Dementors bravely charged towards Umbridge against the white light, startling her and causing her to swing her wand in retaliation. Without her wand, Umbridge seemed to have lost her last vestiges of sanity, as she waved her arms wildly in an attempt to physically drive the Dementors away, cursing.
Get out of here.
Not only did Umbridge's words not work, but they also infuriated the evil creatures, causing the Dementors to remove their hoods and reveal their hideous faces. Umbridge was knocked to the ground by the Dementor, and her face was pressed against it.
Expecto Patronum, Expecto Patronum.
McGonagall waved her wand in Umbridge's direction, and a beautiful, majestic tabby cat leapt from its tip. A swarm of Dementors descended upon the Patronus, attempting to tear it to shreds, but McGonagall was far more skilled than Umbridge. The tabby cat was as powerful as a tiger, and the Dementors were no match for the Patronus. In a matter of seconds, the Dementors were defeated. The tabby cat moved like lightning towards Umbridge and knocked the Dementor away.
Get out of the way, don't come near me, I was wrong.
Shouted Umbridge as she rolled on the floor, as if she were suffering from schizophrenia. It was not until the cold had worn off that Umbridge opened her eyes in alarm, only to find that the rotting face in front of her was gone, replaced by a majestic tabby cat. Umbridge managed to get to her feet and pick up her wand, which had fallen to the ground. Then she looked at McGonagall, who was standing at the side, and recalled how pathetic she looked just now. Umbridge suspected that McGonagall wanted to see her make a fool of herself, so instead of thanking her, Umbridge shouted at her.
Why didn't you do it earlier?
McGonagall was so angry that she laughed. She was about to retort when the Dementors attacked again, and McGonagall waved her wand impatiently, sending them flying. Perhaps due to his limited ability, McGonagall was unable to drive all of the Dementors away and only managed to miss a few. Knowing from previous encounters with her own kind that McGonagall was not easy to deal with, they all charged towards Umbridge. Umbridge's face turned green at the sight of a horde of rotting, disgusting creatures approaching her, and she ran frantically towards him. McGonagall raised her eyebrows and defeated the Dementors in pursuit of Umbridge.
You should have seen it just now. My abilities are limited, so it's impossible for me to take care of everything. It's already not easy for me to protect myself.
Praise God.
Comrades, hold fast. Unity is strength and perseverance is victory.
Chapter 410, Dementors, Our Hero Will Return. As a wizard, Ivan did not particularly care whether the Dementors lived or died. With that in mind, Ivan dragged the sack out of there while the commotion attracted everyone's attention, intending to find the nearest secret passage to the meeting place he and Harry had agreed upon. Shortly after Ivan's departure, several professors and aurors on guard duty went all out to silence the rioting Dementors. Umbridge looked angrily at the Dementors trapped in a small circle and wanted to order the Dementors who had offended her and caused her to make a fool of herself to be executed. However, Umbridge was only thinking this in her head, and her anger had not yet completely destroyed her sanity, so she knew that even if she gave the order, it would not be carried out by aurors or professors at Hogwarts. Umbridge looked angrily at the auror accompanying her.
Oldman, find out what's going on, and why did those Dementors attack me?
The auror named Oldman nodded and made a strange noise as he communicated with the Dementors.
These Dementors claim that you were the one who attacked their fellow Dementors, and that you intended to punish them in the harshest manner possible, so they were prepared to retaliate. Bollocks!
Umbridge raged. She did say that, but it was just a threat to force a Dementor to make the right choice.
Ask them where the Dementor was that was guarding the junction in the first place and find it.
Umbridge hissed, thinking of the culprit. She couldn't do anything to the horde of Dementors, but she had to punish them, and the Dementor that had dared to cross her was put to death. The aurors nodded, then began talking to the Dementors. After a while, communication seemed to be hampered, and the Dementors became agitated. As intelligent creatures, it was naturally impossible for Dementors to hand over their companions who had awakened their free consciousness. However, after some private communication, they discovered that one of the Dementors was missing. The hero who could speak fluently had disappeared. For a moment, the Dementors were sad and angry. They felt that Ivan must have sacrificed himself in the battle and died bravely. At this thought, the Dementors became agitated.
What's wrong now? All I did was ask them to point out the Dementor that started the riot, and what did they say?
Umbridge asked, unable to understand why the Dementors were so agitated. Oldman's expression became even more strange when he understood what the Dementors were saying.
These Dementors claim that their great hero was killed by one of our own in the last battle, so they are furious and demand an explanation.
Umbridge wondered if she had misheard. Did these Dementors think the man who had provoked the High Inquisitor was a great hero? Before she could speak, the aurors continued.
Also,
Oldman, find out what's going on, and why did those Dementors attack me? The auror named Oldman nodded and made a strange noise as he communicated with the Dementors. These Dementors claim that you were the one who attacked their fellow Dementors, and that you intended to punish them in the harshest manner possible, so they were prepared to retaliate. Bollocks, Umbridge raged. She did say that, but it was just a threat to force a Dementor to make the right choice.
these Dementors are poisonous, aren't they?
Chapter 411, I carried a soul catcher for you. With that in mind, Yvonne decided to think long and hard about it. At the very least, she needed a suitable solution. While she was thinking, Ivan stepped into an abandoned classroom. The classroom looked very spacious, but it was a little messy. There were dozens of tables and chairs scattered around, and the podium was covered in a thick layer of dust. Before he came in, the classroom was already occupied.
Ivan's finally. I'm sorry, something happened and I was delayed.
Ivan explained as he dragged the sack closed. Harry didn't care, of course, but he was curious about the sack Ivan was holding, especially since it was moving as if it contained a restless creature.
What's in this?
Harry asked curiously.
Of course it's for you to practice your props for the puffs.
Ivan patted the sack, and the Dementors inside quivered as if trying to get out.
A prop, is it a boggart?
Harry guessed, thinking about it. Having attended defense against the dark arts, Harry was immediately reminded of the boggart he had seen last time, which took the shape of one's worst fears. As much as he hated to admit it, Harry knew that if he confronted Boggart, he would most likely end up in Dementor form. This should be the best way to practice. After all, you can't really find a Dementor for combat practice, right? Ivan shook his head and explained.
No, it wasn't a boggart. The one Professor Lupin used for his classes was dead, and I couldn't find any more boggles anytime soon.
Was it really a Dementor? Harry's mind went blank, and he looked at Ivan in astonishment.
How dare you?
Harry looked at Ivan in admiration. Many witches and wizards avoided Dementors, but Ivan caught one and carried it over his shoulder. And if he remembered correctly, the Dementors were sent by the Ministry of Magic to capture Sirius Black. Was it really okay for Ivan to just kidnap them? Harry suddenly remembered seeing a large number of Dementors flying down from the sky through the window, and realized that Ivan was most likely responsible for their strange behavior.
Ivan, I just saw a lot of Dementors heading out of the castle. Were they looking for you? SHHH, don't ever try to keep it a secret. It's got to do with the Ministry of Magic, and if they find out about it, I'll probably be in big trouble.
Ivan didn't say it explicitly. He put his index finger to his lips and made a gesture of silencing them. Ivan's original plan was to kidnap a Dementor, but so much had happened that it would be disastrous if the Ministry caught him. While it is common knowledge in the wizarding world that wizards are unable to transfigure into magical creatures using the animagus, Umbridge may not have been able to recognize herself as the Dementor who caused the trouble. But holding Ministry of Magic employees in private is no small crime. Harry was touched when he read Ivan's attitude. Knowing full well that Ivan was taking such a risk to get him to practice the Patronus charm, Harry quickly promised to keep it a secret. Yvonne nodded. Harry was not a loudmouth like Ron, and he was usually reliable enough not to let anything slip. The only thing to be wary of is Dumbledore using Dementor on Harry. However, after more than 2 years of battle with Dumbledore, Ivan guessed that an orderly white wizard like Dumbledore would not abuse magic that could see through thoughts and read memories. The last few times he used Dementor, it was either because he had done something that involved the Dark Lord, or because he found it hard to understand. Furthermore, when Dumbledore used Dementor, it was mostly to confirm the authenticity of the words, and not to dig deep into the memory. It is therefore unlikely that Dumbledore learned of today's events through Harry.
Dobby.
As Ivan's voice echoed through the classroom, a small, ugly house elf appeared in front of them.
Mr. Harles.
Dobby blinked his bulb-sized eyes at Ivan for a moment, then turned back to Harry and exclaimed.
Oh,
Hi.
Harry awkwardly greeted the house elf who had screwed him over.
Is there anything I can do for you, sir?
Dobby asked Ivan, not forgetting his duties after his brief moment of joy.
I need to teach Harry a spell, and I don't want to be disturbed. So please go down the corridor and let us know if anyone comes, understood?
Ivan explained. Although it was an abandoned classroom, the chances of someone breaking in were small, but it was a precaution.
Yes, sir, Dobby won't let anyone interrupt Mr. and Harry Potter's practice of magic.
Dobby promised, patting his chest, and disappeared from the classroom with a snap of his fingers. When Dobby was gone, Harry asked curiously.
Isn't Dobby Malfoy's house elf? Why would he listen to you? You remember last year when Dobby stole that dark object. Because it ruined Malfoy's father's plans, he was punished.
Ivan briefly explained how he had manipulated Dobby into being freed.
I bet old Malfoy was furious.
Harry gloated when he heard Ivan screw Lucius Malfoy over with a glove in his diary. Even without seeing it with his own eyes, Harry could imagine Lucius Malfoy's frustration, and it made him feel better.
Yeah, and then I hired Dobby.
Ivan laughed, then suddenly asked.
So Harry, happy? Hey.
Harry looked at Ivan in confusion, not quite understanding what he was saying. Ivan's face grew serious, and he said seriously,
I want you to remember this feeling. The secret of the Patronus charm is to magically condense positive emotions into power.
Chapter 412, Dementor, Blondie.
If you're ready, we can start right now.
Ivan threw the sack away. Harry's smile froze at Ivan's words, and he nodded solemnly. Ivan took a few steps back until he was in an inconspicuous corner, then waved his wand, and the rope that bound the sack came free. Harry looked over nervously, his wand in his hand, thinking over and over the spells he had practiced the night before, certain that he would be able to overcome his fear this time. The next moment, a chill emanated from the bag. In the enclosed classroom, the oil lamp flickered for a few moments before falling silent, and as the black mist spread, a cold, dead feeling came over Harry. A withered, scabbed palm touched the edge of the sack, and the opening gradually widened. A mummified corpse in a tattered cloak floated out and hovered in the air. Faintly, Harry could see a rotting head with a gaping hole under the cloak, and a multitude of unidentifiable substances being sucked into the strange mouth. Harry raised his wand high above his head, his wrist trembling. He had thought he was prepared for anything, but it was only when he faced the Dementor that he realized how terrifying it was.
Expecto Patronus.
A silver mist sprang from the tip of the wand and collided with the Dementor, the two opposing forces fighting each other in the confined space. The silvery white mist acted as a shield, protecting Harry from the Dementors. However, since it was his first time using the Patronus charm, the mist seemed to be too weak to ward off a Dementor. On the contrary, the Dementor's power kept affecting Harry's mind through the mist, and the white mist grew thinner and thinner, and the withered, rotting hand reached out to him through it.
Lily, take Harry and go. It's him. Go, run, I'll hold him.
Vaguely, Harry saw a man stumbling out of the room.
What?
Ivan was confused. He was about to wave his wand to release a Patronus charm to save Harry when the Dementor crawled back into the sack. Was he that self-conscious? Ivan had a strange look on his face until he remembered the legendary title of enemy of the Dementors.
But am I that horrible?
Ivan pursed his lips, unable to understand the extreme behavior of the Dementors. He was clearly a very good man, not an evil wizard.
Harry,
Yvonne asked worriedly as she hurried to Harry's side.
What just happened? I heard someone shouting my name.
Harry was still in a daze, blurting out what he had just seen.
That's your memory, Harry.
Ivan interrupted, adding emphasis.
The power of the Dementor brings back the most painful memories buried deep in your mind.
At this point, Ivan began to regret his decision to use Dementors as an aid to his training. It seemed inappropriate to use Dementors as an aid to his training, and although Harry did not pass out as he had in the original timeline, he seemed to have been more affected by it. It took Harry a while to realize that there was no such thing as Lord Voldemort or his parents, and that it was all in the past.
I'm sorry.
Harry tried to explain, but he stammered and didn't know what to say. In the end, he sighed and looked around before asking.
Ivan.
Chapter 413, Harry, why would I be afraid of such a thing? Harry looked inside. The bag was bulging, the rope used to bind it was lying on the floor, and the opening was wide open. It was pitch black inside.
Did you just cast a spell to ward off the Dementor? How did you do that? I don't think that's the power of the Patronus charm, is it?
Harry asked curiously, remembering how the Dementor had let go of him and fled in terror. I just don't know what kind of magic Ivan used to make such an evil creature panic.
No, I didn't actually do anything. The Dementor ran away when it saw me.
Ivan shrugged helplessly. Harry was dubious. Weren't Dementors supposed to be chaotic and evil? Were they supposed to be scared and run away? Harry could hardly imagine.
Those Dementors are also intelligent creatures, so of course they're afraid of being stronger than they are.
Ivan explained, seeing the doubt in Harry's eyes.
If you fully master the Patronus charm, you will find that Dementors are not difficult to deal with. For example,
Harry said sullenly, looking ashamed.
Well, at least you didn't pass out again, did you? That's a big improvement. You can't expect to learn a high-level charm like that after just 1 or 2 tries, can you?
Yvonne tried to reassure him. Alerted by Ivan, Harry noticed this and his low spirits lifted. The worst thing that happened to him during the school year was that every time he encountered a Dementor, he would fall into a humiliating coma, which caused Gryffindor to lose the match. This time, he did not manage to defeat the Dementor, but at least he managed to hold on without losing consciousness. Harry felt that if he tried a few more times, he might be able to defeat this monster. With this thought in mind, Harry pulled himself together, propped himself up, and got to his feet.
Are you sure you don't want to take a break?
Yvonne asked worriedly.
no, I'm fine.
Harry shook his head and picked up his wand, assuming a fighting stance. Ivan raised his eyebrows but did not try to persuade him otherwise. He lifted his wand and pointed it at the opening of the sack. Wisps of white mist condensed into a ball and flew there, intending to cast a spell to force the Dementors out of the sack. Harry kept his eyes fixed on the ball of light, his wand held ready to strike. However, when the ball of light entered the sack and the Dementor did not come out, Harry looked at Ivan strangely. Ivan was equally confused. He tried again, using the Patronus charm to create an even more powerful ball of white mist, but still could not force the Dementors out. Ivan said this awkwardly, then hurried forward and lifted the sack, turning it over and shaking it violently.
Come on out.
Unfortunately, the Dementor seemed to stick to the sack, and Ivan was unable to shake it off. Harry took in the scene with a strange look on his face. Was it really a Dementor? Why was he afraid of it? Ivan, on the other hand, was stumped after trying and failing to find a solution. While he could destroy the vessel in which the Dementor resided and prevent it from escaping, he had spent a great deal of time creating it, and once destroyed, there would be nothing left to trap the Dementor. Ivan remembered that Dementors could understand wizards, and tentatively poked his wand into the sack.
Come out, I know you can understand what I'm saying. We don't mean any harm, we just want you to help us. There's a young wizard here who wants to learn the Patronus charm and needs your cooperation.
The Dementor couldn't have come out of the sack, of course. It didn't believe Ivan, and it certainly couldn't have helped a wizard learn to restrain his or her magic. Seeing that this method was ineffective, Ivan threatened to destroy the Dementor if it disagreed with him, and would consider letting it go if it did. Harry was at a loss as to how to deal with Ivan, who was blackmailing and threatening the Dementors. His impression of the Dementors had been completely destroyed in just a few minutes. Harry, however, had his doubts about Ivan's efforts. Could Dementors really communicate normally with wizards? The Dementors, threatened by Ivan, cautiously poked their heads out of their burlap sacks and floated out. Its disgusting, rotting body looked much more incorporeal than before, and there were several large holes in its tattered cloak, which Harry assumed were caused by the 2 white glowing balls. As a result, the Dementor did not appear to be terrifying in general, but seemed rather pitiful.
Well, Harry, I've got to deal with this Dementor, and it's happy to help you,
said Ivan, who was quite satisfied with the Dementor's general attitude. Harry, on the other hand, felt that Mr. Dementor was probably not as happy as Ivan made him out to be.
Expecto Patronus.
Chapter 414, Practicing the Patronus Charm.
Expecto Patronum, Expecto Patronum.
Harry shouted as loud as he could, and once again the white light forced the Dementor back a few steps, the thick white mist threatening to take the form of a stag, but then it dissipated. After casting the spell, Harry panted with exhaustion. After a night of intense practice, he had gained a rudimentary understanding of the advanced spell, but was unable to conjure his Patronus. Every time he was about to succeed, he was interrupted.
Okay, Harry, let's stop for a second,
Ivan said, frowning at the situation. Harry reluctantly tried again, but the Dementor had had enough and dived back into the sack. Seeing this, Harry reluctantly gave up on the idea of practicing again. Ivan stepped forward and took a box of chocolate frogs from the pocket of his wizarding robes.
You need to relax now.
Harry nodded, took the box from Ivan, took out a chocolate frog and bit into it. There was a bitter taste in his mouth, mixed with a hint of sweetness, and when he swallowed it, Harry felt warmth rise up from his stomach, dispelling the chill he had felt when he first touched the Dementor. When Harry had recovered somewhat, Ivan continued.
All in all, you've done a wonderful job.
Harry said to Ivan after a moment's hesitation. There was something else that Harry did not say, which was that it always made him feel bad to think about happy memories in such circumstances, and that he felt sorry for his dead parents.
How can you think that? Just because your parents died for you, you're prepared to keep on frowning. They sacrificed their lives to protect you, so they must be hoping that you'll grow up healthy and happy.
Yvonne said, understanding Harry's meaning.
But the one who betrayed them.
Harry said through gritted teeth, his body shaking. His parents, who had risked their lives to protect him, had died to a traitor's snitch. All the joy that Harry felt at the thought of Black escaping Azkaban, wandering around, and even trying to kill him vanished.
Harry, let's call it a day. Why, I'm in great shape. 1 or 2 more tries and I'm sure it'll work.
Harry said eagerly.
You've been practicing all night. Even if you're not tired, you should at least give our Mr. Dementor a break, shouldn't you? You can take it, but it can't. Besides, you don't need to practice. You need to feel joyless.
Ivan said jokingly, shrugging. Harry thought about it for a moment and decided against staying up all night learning the Patronus charm. Ivan then suggested that they all go to Hogsmeade the following afternoon to have a bit of fun and calm down, as it would help with the study of the Patronus charm.
Maybe you'll be in a good mood after your visit, and will be able to condense your Patronus when you return.
Ivan said with a smile. It was said jokingly, but Yvonne thought so. Harry's inability to conjure a Patronus was, in the end, due to the knot in his stomach that had been formed over Sirius, and that it would not be difficult for him to master the art of the Phoebus Patronus if he could just undo it.
But I shouldn't be able to go there. Nobody would sign their application for me.
So what? I don't have an application, but nobody's ever stopped me.
Yvonne laughed. Because of the attack on Alicia at the beginning of the school year and his hiding place in Knockoff Alley, the application was sent somewhere and Ivan never received it.
You know a way to sneak out of the school without being seen by the Dementors?
Harry asked, immediately understanding Ivan's intention.
Yes, I know a secret passage that leads directly to Hogsmeade and it's not guarded by Dementors, so, are you going?
Yvonne asked tentatively.
Of course.
Harry nodded without hesitation, not caring that he might be intercepted by Sirius. Or perhaps Harry was not afraid of this traitor, and even wanted to find him and send Black back to Azkaban. That was where the disgraceful traitor should be. When Harry agreed, Ivan tied the sack back up with a wave of his wand, then snapped his fingers to summon Dobby and had him bring the sack to the room of requirement. After tidying up, they left the classroom together and returned to Gryffindor's dormitory. Ron, who was playing with his mouse alone in the dormitory, heard the door open and turned to look at Harry. Noticing the fatigue on his face, he asked curiously.
Harry, Ivan, where have you been? Why are you back so late?
We went somewhere to practice our magic.
Ivan replied casually, his gaze lingering on Scabbers for a moment before he continued.
Right, Ron, Harry and I are going to Hogsmeade tomorrow. Want to come?
Chapter 415, Double Happiness.
Yes, of course.
Ron agreed without hesitation, and when he realized what Yvonne was saying, he looked at her in surprise.
Wait.
Ivan said, shaking his head.
And I have the cloak of invisibility, so I won't be seen.
Harry nodded and took the silver cloak out of his suitcase.
Cool, this is great.
Ron went up to Harry and gave him a big hug, thumping him on the shoulder, knowing full well how much Harry wanted to go to Hogsmeade. They soon began talking about Hogsmeade, mainly about Ron, who had been there once before and described the strange shops to Harry.
Oh my God, how could you?
Hermione's high-pitched voice attracted the attention of the young wizards in the Great Hall, and when she realized this, she lowered her voice and scolded Harry.
Harry, did you know that Sirius Black is out looking for you, and that you should be in the castle instead of sneaking off to Hogsmeade?
Yes, of course, Ron agreed without hesitation, and when he realized what Yvonne was saying, he looked at her in surprise. Wait,
Come on, Hermione. Harry and I have been talking all night, and now none of this is a problem. We've thought of a solution. Yes, Ivan found a secret passage that leads us straight to Hogsmeade. My cloak of invisibility won't fool the Dementors, but it will fool Black.
Harry explained that although he wanted to go to Hogsmeade, he was not so stupid as to go out and commit suicide. From Harry's point of view, at least, it was foolproof, and Sirius would never have guessed that the person he was looking for would be able to sneak around unseen.
I think Harry's been in a bit of a bad mood lately, and he's been looking rather glum, so I thought I'd give him a trip to Hogsmeade to relax. It'll help him to sort himself out. Anyway, I'm here, don't worry too much.
Hermione was mollified by Ivan's explanation, but she was still worried. She was well aware of Ivan's prowess. During their fight at Knockoff Alley, Ivan was able to use his invisibility cloak to easily kill 10 dark wizards. However, Sirius Black was no weakling. He was a vicious thug who had a record of blowing up entire streets with a powerful charm. Presumably, he would be difficult to deal with.
Brave and fearlessness.
But sometimes being too clever was not a good thing, as it was too troublesome to fool. After breakfast, they headed into the classroom. Today was not a day of rest, but a day of defense against the dark arts classes. For Harry, this year's defense against the dark arts class was such a treat that he would rather be in Lupin's class all day long. The prospect of going to Hogsmeade in the afternoon was a double pleasure, and Harry suddenly felt that this was the best day of the term. As such, Harry's smile never left his face as he made his way to the front of the class and sat down, anticipating the lesson. Learn how to deal with a merman, or deal with goblins. As Harry fantasized, the last person he expected to see entered the room, and the smile on his face slowly faded.
If I'm not mistaken, this is a defense against the dark arts class, Professor. Yes.
Snape came in, dragging his robes behind him, his hollow eyes locked with Harry's, and he replied in a slow, mocking voice.
But I'm the one teaching today.
Chapter 416, Poor Harry.
Why, where is Professor Lupin?
Harry demanded in a sharp tone.
He's been under the weather these past few days, and he can't give you lessons.
Snape explained, then sneered.
And?
Harry didn't believe a word of it. Everyone at school knew that Snape had always wanted to be professor of defense against the dark arts, and that he was at odds with Lupin. For example, Neville once dressed Boggart in women's clothing during one of Lupin's classes, winning his admiration. Harry, believing Snape might hold a grudge and murder Professor Lupin in Dumbledore's absence, insisted that Snape tell him how Professor Lupin was.
I will only say this once. He is alive and well, and his life is not in danger.
Snape's face showed his annoyance as he stared at Harry with his empty eyes.
It's class time, sit down, Potter.
Harry, however, showed no intention of moving, and was more worried about Lupin than about Snape's punishment.
10 points are deducted from Gryffindor. If you don't sit down in 3 seconds, I'll deduct another 50 points.
Snape enunciated each word clearly. Harry was furious, but he had no choice but to sit back down, as Snape had already started counting, knowing full well that Snape was a man of his word when it came to taking points.
Don't worry, Harry, Professor Lupin will be fine.
Ivan, who was sitting nearby, tried to calm Harry down when he saw how upset and worried he was. Ivan was well aware of Lupin's condition, and knew that it was due to the effects of the wolfsbane potion that he was feeling so weak and ill. Ivan was puzzled when he remembered that the wolfsbane potion he made according to the recipe given by the system did not have this defect. It is unknown whether this flaw existed because Snape did not crack it thoroughly enough in reverse, or whether he deliberately wanted to screw with Lupin.
Have you seen Professor Lupin in the past 2 days? How is he?
Harry asked anxiously, keeping his voice low. He wondered if Lupin was seriously ill or had been targeted by Snape. Ivan could not bring himself to tell him that Lupin was a werewolf, so he told him that he had seen Lupin yesterday and that he was fine. Harry let go of his worries. Snape's defense against the dark arts class was very different from Lupin's. It was less fun and laughter, and more of cold, hard knowledge to give Gryffindor the occasional demerit. Not only that, Snape ignored the lesson and had everyone turn to page 394 to learn how to identify and kill a werewolf.
Potter, will you tell me how to spot a werewolf wizard hiding in the crowd?
In the middle of class, Snape suddenly questioned her.
I don't know, Professor, we haven't got to where we should be according to the curriculum.
Harry began to explain.
It's my class now, I don't need you to tell me what to do.
Snape interrupted Harry and then glanced around the classroom, looking disappointed.
I really didn't expect a bunch of third years to be unable to tell a werewolf apart.
Why, where is Professor Lupin? Harry demanded in a sharp tone. He's been under the weather these past few days, and he can't give you lessons.
Quiet.
Snape shouted to stop the young witches and wizards whispering to each other. Snape then proceeded to ignore Hermione's raised hands, and proceeded to teach them how to differentiate a werewolf from a normal human. It emphasized the cruelty of werewolves, even going so far as to state that there were regular attacks on the wizarding community, and that some of the less courageous young wizards thought they were listening to a horror story.
In addition, one of the most important differences between a werewolf wizard and an ordinary wizard is that, at the full moon, they are forced to transform into mindless werewolves, causing a lot of damage.
Snape paused for a moment before continuing.
Some werewolves, in order to hide themselves, regularly drink a potion called Wolfsbane Potion, which allows them to maintain a certain level of sanity in their transfiguration.
Wolfsbane Potion. Many young wizards turned to look at Ivan when they heard this name. If they remembered correctly, Ivan was awarded a second-class Order of Merlin last year for the invention of the wolf venom potion.
Oh, I almost forgot, we have an expert on werewolves here.
Snape's gaze also fell on Ivan, disappointment on his face.
Unfortunately, our experts don't seem to know as much about werewolves as reported.
Snape was extremely upset with Ivan for not being able to reveal Lupin's identity for several months, suspecting that Ivan had in fact seen through Lupin's cover, but not revealing it for some reason. The wizards below could not understand a word Snape was saying. Only Ivan knew what Snape was getting at, and he wasn't going to do it. He didn't even try to get up for the lesson, fearing that if he said too much, it would increase the likelihood of Lupin's exposure. A defense against the dark arts lesson was soon over with Snape's gloomy voice. After class, as Harry walked down the corridor, he could not help but vent his pent-up anger.
Why do we have to learn to tell the difference between a normal wizard and a werewolf? It's not a lesson we should be taking right now, and it's ridiculous that Snape expected a werewolf to be lurking around.
Chapter 417, Welcome to Hogsmeade. In response to Harry's complaints, Ron immediately agreed that Snape's teaching skills were nothing compared to Professor Lupin's. Yvonne did not reply, as Harry had hit the nail on the head, and Hermione was silent, as if she were thinking about something.
I wouldn't be so sure of that, Potter. I'm guessing you weren't paying attention to Professor Snape's lecture.
They all turned to see Malfoy, arrogantly approaching with his two henchmen. Malfoy gave Harry a look of disdain, then turned back to Ivan with confidence.
Just you wait, Hulse, I'll find the evidence before you do.
Malfoy's smug expression and words confused Harry and Ron, but Malfoy ignored them, leaving Ivan with these words and leaving.
Does Malfoy think any of us are werewolves? It's ridiculous.
Ron complained. Harry nodded, certain that his friends were not werewolf wizards, as none of them took the Wolfsbane potion regularly or suddenly vanished on the night of the full moon.
Stupefy.
A red light flew past and hit the grayish-black rat. Scabbers' eyes widened and he fainted.
There, that's done, isn't it?
Ivan said with satisfaction as he slowly put his wand away. He had been worried that Scabbers would try to escape, and now the problem was perfectly solved. Ron opened his mouth and looked at Ivan with a strange expression, but he didn't say anything. He also felt that his pet mouse had been acting a little crazy lately, and it would be good to get some sleep while out.
Let's get out of here, I can't wait.
Harry had changed and grabbed a handful of galleons. Yvonne nodded, and the three of them left the Gryffindor common room, where Hermione was already waiting for them.
We're always going out there, and Harry can't hide in Hogwarts for the rest of his life, and a truly brave Gryffindor shouldn't be afraid of anything.
Ron vowed. Hermione scowled at him. Being brave was not the same as being reckless, and it was not the same as courting death.
Separate left and right.
Ivan snapped, tapping his wand on the statue. With a soft rumble, the statue's hump automatically parted to reveal a narrow, dark passageway large enough for a thin man to squeeze through.
Come in.
Ivan said, and was the first to dive into the dark space below.
I have a feeling we're doing something bad.
Harry complained, looking at the dark entrance.
It is. If you get caught going out, Professor McGonagall will deduct 100 points.
Hermione rolled her eyes but followed him in. Harry and the others followed Ivan as he passed under the glittering stars of the illuminating charm. After an unknown amount of time, when Harry's legs were beginning to ache and he was about to ask a question, Ivan stopped and pointed his wand at the ceiling, causing a trapdoor to open. Harsh light shone through the opening, causing Harry and the others to squint uncomfortably. Ivan took the lead and jumped in.
Come on up, this is it.
Chapter 418, A Chance Encounter at Honeydukes. Harry, Ron, and Hermione climbed the steps one by one.
Where are we?
Harry asked, dusting himself off and looking around. It looked like a cellar, surrounded by crates and other wooden boxes, all of them covered in date-coded notes.
The basement, we're in the Honeydukes basement, to be exact.
Ivan explained. Hermione looked at Harry and warned him.
Harry, hurry up and put the cloak on, don't let anyone see you.
Yeah.
Harry nodded, put the cloak on, and disappeared. Ivan then led them quietly out of the basement. Originally, Ron and the others were nervous about being seen. After all, if they sneaked out of someone's basement and were caught, it would be the end of them. However, when they did, Ron realized that no one would even notice where they came from. Because it was so busy, it was packed with Hogwarts seniors, and there was a lot of laughter and noise. The shelves were lined with savory sweets. There were large, creamy marzipan creams, sparkling pink coconut ice cakes, honey-colored toffees, and hundreds of flavors of chocolate. Especially the shelves against the wall, where magical sweets with special effects were placed. For example, a pepper imp that can breathe fire after eating, an explosive marshmallow that explodes with a bite, a thick, bloody lollipop.
Blood-scented lollipops are supposed to be terrible, and no one but a vampire should like them.
Hermione picked out a few sweets, then hesitantly put some of the less interesting ones back down and turned to Ivan for his opinion. Ivan shook his head. He had never tasted anything like it and was trying to decide what to say when he felt a tap on his shoulder.
Are you looking for any more sweets that breathe fire? We've got some right here.
George and Fred came up to them, giggling and holding an unbranded sweet.
This is our latest research, and it's definitely more interesting than the sweets here. How about it? Want to try it? It's free.
Ivan was surprised to see the pair of them. Ivan, however, politely declined the Weasley brothers' practical jokes, turning them down with a shrug.
We don't want to be your lab rats.
George shook his head in disappointment, then glanced at Ivan and the others and said in surprise,
That's a pity. If you want to buy it again, you'll have to pay.
Oh, what a poor boy. Didn't you tell Harry about the secret passage? He's been so unhappy lately, you should have brought him out for a walk.
Fred said with a sigh.
Harry will be safe at school, you know.
Hermione scowled at them, speaking in a high-pitched voice, but then realizing that she might be overheard by one of the fugitives, she lowered her voice and enunciated every word.
You know Sirius Black is still after him.
What's there to be afraid of? Ivan's here, isn't he? I think he's as good at magic as some Aurors. If Black dares to come, we'll catch him.
George grinned as he unwrapped the sweet and popped it into his mouth. However, the sweet stopped halfway to George's mouth and floated in the air, moving slowly and disappearing before their eyes.
What the hell?
George was taken aback, and Fred's face was filled with bewilderment. No, most ghosts could not do this. Hermione and Ron, on the other hand, were trying not to laugh. They certainly knew what was going on. Harry, who was hiding in the invisibility cloak, swallowed the sweet and immediately felt a burning sensation in his throat. Harry's head snapped back and he sneezed, sending a jet of fire from his mouth that nearly burned the shelves nearby. A few coughs soon filled the seemingly empty space, followed by Harry's grumbling voice.
This stuff is too pungent. You should have improved on it.
George and Fred took several steps back in alarm at the noise, then relaxed when they recognized Harry's voice. How could they not understand that Harry was pulling their leg, but they were more curious as to how he managed it.
Is it the disillusionment charm? Harry, you've mastered this.
George immediately thought of the disillusionment charm and exclaimed in amazement.
We've always wanted to learn it, but we still haven't mastered it.
Fred exclaimed in disbelief.
No, I don't know any such advanced spells. It's just the cloak of invisibility.
Harry lifted the cloak a little to reveal his face before putting it back on.
Cool, that's convenient.
George and Fred exclaimed. The cloak of invisibility cost a fortune, and if they'd had one in the first place, it would have been a lot easier to get around. They might even be able to go to places they had always wanted to go but never dared to go.
Harry, you shouldn't have done that. If anyone had seen you, you'd be finished.
Don't worry, George and Fred won't say a word if no one's looking.
Harry shook his head dismissively. He didn't think it was such a coincidence.
Yes, 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 we're very tight-lipped.
The Weasleys said, gesturing for each other to keep quiet. They laughed and talked for a while before George and Fred left, and Ron and the others picked out sweets, but Ivan had to pay for them on Harry's behalf. Harry, Ron, and Hermione then drag Yvonne to Zonk's joke shop to buy lots of interesting practical jokes.
Ivan, what are we doing here? There doesn't seem to be anything.
Chapter 419, Scabbers.
This is the Shrieking Shack, which is quite famous in Hogsmeade.
Ivan explained but was interrupted by Ron.
I've heard of it. Some of the senior students say it was once haunted, that it used to howl like a banshee in the middle of the night.
Harry shuddered at Ron's words and wondered why Ivan had brought them to this place.
That's just hearsay. The Screaming Shack isn't haunted. The howling is for other reasons.
Ivan explained casually, then turned to look around for Harry.
I've brought you here to solve Harry's problem. A maid.
Harry pulled off his invisibility cloak and pointed at himself in confusion, while Ron and Hermione were equally confused.
Yes, to be precise, to clear up a misunderstanding, when in fact the betrayal.
Ivan began and was about to give them a detailed explanation when his sharp eyes caught sight of something grayish-black that had suddenly come out of Ron's pocket. Ron immediately sensed that something was wrong, and when he looked down, he saw his beloved mouse frantically scurrying away.
Scabbers.
Ron yelled, throwing himself at Scabbers as he tried to catch him, only to miss. After dodging Ron, the grayish-black rat tried even harder to escape, its paws leaving afterimages behind. Peter was terrified. After Ivan knocked him out cold, he was woken up by the noise and the commotion, and before he knew what was happening, he heard Ivan talking. Harry and the others did not understand what Ivan was trying to say, but Peter did, and although he did not know how Ivan had learned of this, or whether he had come into contact with Sirius, it was always a good idea to run. Seeing that the exit was right in front of him and the bright sunlight shining down from the outside, a long-lost smile appeared on Peter's face and he slowly relaxed.
Scabbers coming.
However, a voice shattered Peter's fantasy, and Ivan calmly waved his wand. Peter, who was only one step away from successfully escaping the Shrieking Shack, felt his body being pulled by a certain force in despair. Unwilling to give up, Peter dug his claws into the rotten wood of the floor, leaving scratch marks on it. Unfortunately, the power of magic was not something that a mere rat could resist. No matter how unwilling Peter was, it was useless. His body quickly flew back the way he came.
Ivan, thank you so much.
Ron complained as he approached, reaching out to scratch Patchball. Ivan backed away from Ron's hand, warning him.
For your own safety, it would be better if I had this mouse for now.
Ron didn't look happy.
You'd better listen to him. Peter has been lurking around you for so many years. You're only alive because you're lucky.
Harry and the others shivered at the sound of a deep, hoarse voice and turned to see a large black dog jumping down from the dais. A dog, a talking black dog. Ron's mind went blank and he stumbled back in shock. Harry was thinking more about the dog, which he had seen many times before, wandering around him, and, according to Professor Trelawney's prophecy, dying and having bad omens.
You shouldn't have come out at this hour, at least not until I've explained things to them.
Ivan complained to the dog.
Didn't you tell them before? Anyway, I've been waiting too long.
The large black dog shook his head humanely, his gaze lingering on Harry for a moment before turning to the gray rat in Ivan's hand. Peter knew he was doomed when he saw the dog, and he hung limp in midair. As everyone watched, Sirius gradually transformed from a black dog into a wizard.
Harry, we meet officially at last.
Sirius exclaimed. Harry, after a brief period of astonishment, was overcome with anger and pointed his wand at Sirius.
Yes, we finally meet. You betrayed my father and now you're going to kill me. I'm not afraid of you.
Chapter 420, Harry, Ron, We've Beat Black. As they confronted each other, Ron pulled Harry aside, pulled out his wand and pointed it at Sirius.
Harry, get out of here. Put on the cloak of invisibility and I'll hold them off.
Ron then looked angrily at Ivan and scolded him.
I was so wrong to trust you, Ivan. I can't believe you're working with Black and tricked us into coming here. As I said before, I'm here to correct a misunderstanding.
Ivan explained.
Misunderstanding? There's been no misunderstanding. Black killed my parents, and you.
Harry is completely out of control, having given up all hope of escape, his anger consuming him. This scene, in Harry's opinion, was a reenactment of the original.
I'm not Harry, it's not what you think.
Sirius hurried closer, trying to explain. Harry, however, made a sudden move and waved his wand.
Expel Irmus.
A red light shot out from the tip of his wand, and Sirius instinctively tried to cast an armor charm on himself, but he was afraid of hurting Harry and causing a bigger misunderstanding, so he hesitated for a moment before the red light hit him. Sirius recoiled in pain, and his wand flew out of his hand, spinning in the air before landing in Harry's hand. Harry froze as soon as he caught the wand, feeling strangely ridiculous at how easily he had disarmed Sirius. A red light shot out from the tip of his wand, and Sirius instinctively tried to cast an armor charm on himself, but he was afraid of hurting Harry and causing a bigger misunderstanding, so he hesitated for a moment before the red light hit him. Sirius recoiled in pain, and his wand flew out of his hand, spinning in the air before landing in Harry's hand. Harry froze as soon as he caught the wand, feeling strangely ridiculous at how easily he had disarmed Sirius. You beat him, Harry, Ron exclaimed in shock. He also did not expect the infamous and ferocious Black to be defeated by Harry, but the excitement that followed was hard to hide, as they had defeated one great enemy and now only had to deal with the other. With this in mind, Ron turned to Ivan and shouted, Expelliarmus! A red beam of light shot toward Ivan. Ivan, however, had no intention of taking a beating and immediately activated the protective rings effect, causing the beam of light to bounce back the way it had come when it collided with the magical barrier. Ron was knocked off his feet and crashed into a pile of rotting wood.
Ron!
Harry panicked when he saw Ron's condition and tried to attack Ivan with his wand, but he too was knocked back. Both wands fell into Ivan's hands. Hermione, who was standing next to him, finally broke down and screamed.
Enough, stop fighting.
Hermione, come here, get away from them.
Harry said anxiously as he struggled to his feet.
Don't be stupid, Ivan would have killed us if he wanted to, we couldn't beat him together.
Hermione cried hysterically. She had no idea why Ivan would get involved with Sirius, but she was well aware of the difference in strength between them. If Ivan had conspired with Sirius to bring them to this remote place to kill Harry, he would have done it without explanation. Additionally, Hermione felt that Ivan had no reason to murder Harry.
Right, you should calm down and think about it. Sirius and I haven't attacked you so far, but you did. Isn't that obvious enough?
Ivan looked at Harry and the others and shrugged. Ron, climbing out of the rubble, opened his mouth to retort that he had just been attacked, but choked, remembering that Ivan had merely bounced off the spell he had cast, and in a way Ivan had not attacked him. Harry was even more confused. He looked at Sirius and saw that he had not charged at him to kill him.
Ivan, what the hell is going on?
Hermione began. She was willing to trust Ivan, but she was also very confused and had too many questions.
I was just going to explain it to you.
Ivan said grudgingly, and then proceeded to explain it to the trio.
I won't repeat myself if you know what happened back then, but one thing to correct is that the person who betrayed Harry's father and caused his parents' deaths was not Sirius.
Peter Pettigrew, the hero who went after Black alone and got himself killed.
Harry couldn't help but interrupt Yvonne again, roaring his retort.
Malfoy told me everything, and I checked with Professor McGonagall to see if it was true, and she told me in no uncertain terms that Black had betrayed my father.
Harry, get out of here. Put on the cloak of invisibility and I'll hold them off. Ron then looked angrily at Ivan and scolded him. I was so wrong to trust you, Ivan. I can't believe you're working with Black and tricked us into coming here. As I said before, I'm here to correct a misunderstanding, Ivan explained. Misunderstanding? There's been no misunderstanding. Black killed my parents and you.
No, it's not like that. Peter Pettigrew and I changed our identities at the last minute, and he became the secret keeper. In order to keep it secret, only your father, Peter, and I knew about it.
Harry was suspicious, not believing in coincidence.
You're wrong, Peter isn't dead.
Sirius spat out the words, turning to stare at Ivan's mouse with murderous eyes.
We've got him now.
Harry and the others also turned to look at Scabbers. The grayish-black rat had gone limp and was motionless, as if it were dead. Ron realized what Sirius was trying to say and shouted in disbelief.
You're not saying my Scabbers is Peter, are you? That's impossible, he's just a pet, I've had him for years.
Chapter 421, Does anyone care about Scabbers' feelings? Ron was shaking with rage. Could the world get any better? Why did everyone target his rats? Scabbers was miserable enough being pranked by George and Fred at home, being targeted by Hermione's damned cat this term, and now being blamed for betraying Harry's parents.
Rats generally have a very short lifespan of 1 to 3 years. Do you remember how long Scabbers was in your house?
Ivan asked, breaking Ron's reverie. Ron was momentarily stunned. His rat Scabbers had been inherited from Percy for many years, certainly more than the lifespan of an ordinary mouse.
He's different, maybe he's a magical rat.
Ron said in a strangled voice. Ron simply could not accept the fact that his rat was Peter Pettigrew, that Scabbers was not only his pet, but also his companion in life.
You need to calm down, I can show you the evidence right now.
Ivan said, shaking his head at Ron, who was still struggling on the floor. He then pointed his wand at Scabbers and channeled his magic into him. The rat in Ivan's grip let out the most blood-curdling shriek it had ever uttered in its life. It flailed its limbs wildly and attempted to sink its teeth into Ivan's wand, but to no avail. The magic penetrated its body and soon touched the brain's protective mechanisms. The grayish-black rat began to transform in front of everyone. Its limbs stretch and thicken, its head grows larger, its tail retracts. Harry, who had been watching the entire transformation, stammered. He saw this rat almost every day at school. Who would have thought that Scabbers was actually a transformed wizard and possibly the culprit behind his parents' betrayal?
It's an animagus.
Hermione exclaimed.
What?
Harry and Ron looked at her suspiciously.
Animagus transfiguration. It is an extremely powerful transfiguration spell with almost no flaws, and the effect is to transform a wizard into a specific animal.
Professor McGonagall mentioned it once when we were in transfiguration class, or have you forgotten?
Hermione said quickly.
Did I? Why can't I remember? Harry looked blank, but if Hermione said so, then there must be.
But I remember that the Ministry of Magic kept records of all wizards and witches who could transform into animals, and there was a register of what animals they could transform into, and markings and such.
Hermione looked at Sirius and Peter with a puzzled expression, as it was clear that they were both animagus.
Well said, but you're missing the fact that not everyone is bound by ministry regulations.
Sirius explained, looking at Hermione appreciatively.
It's pretty clear now, isn't it? I don't think I need to explain any further, do you?
Yvonne asked, pointing at Peter Pettigrew, who was curled up on the floor, shivering. Harry nodded and was about to respond when Peter Pettigrew, lying on the ground, screamed.
No, it's not that. You've all been fooled by Black.
Rats generally have a very short lifespan of 1 to 3 years. Do you remember how long Scabbers was in your house? Ivan asked, breaking Ron's reverie. Ron was momentarily stunned. His rat Scabbers had been inherited from Percy for many years, certainly more than the lifespan of an ordinary mouse.
His younger brother Regulus Black is a Death Eater, and his cousin Bellatrix Black is the most loyal slave of you-know-who.
Peter looked at Sirius with a ferocious expression and questioned him.
Dare you deny it?
Everyone except Ivan looked at Sirius in surprise, waiting for his response.
Of course I don't deny it. My brothers and sisters are nothing but scraps.
Sirius admitted, seeing the suspicious looks in the others' eyes.
But as I was a maverick and always loathed their pure-blood beliefs, I was long removed from the family tree by my mother. Who's to say you didn't deliberately lurk around, gain James's trust, and become a traitor?
Chapter 422. Even the Dark Lord is not as cruel as you. Peter Pettigrew's words caused Harry and the others to fall back into a fog, and what had been certain became uncertain again.
That's all the slander you've got. Why don't you explain why you've been hiding for over a decade disguised as a rat?
Sirius scoffed.
It's Lupin. Lupin's been after me. I have to hide.
Peter Pettigrew shouted like a madman.
Professor Lupin,
said Harry and the others in astonishment.
Yes, that's right, Lupin.
Peter Pettigrew once again broke the shocking news, and then he went on tearfully.
Do you know why Lupin was so poor all those years ago? He suspected that I was still alive, so he tried to silence me, and even gave up his job to do so, preferring to starve.
It's Lupin. Lupin's been after me. I have to hide.
And I want to be there to protect you, Harry. You can't imagine how happy I was when I first saw you at Hogwarts.
Ivan, who knew the truth, had a strange look on his face. He knew that Peter Pettigrew was cunning, but he had never expected him to be so good at making things up. Fortunately, he was cautious and did not reveal Peter's identity in public. Otherwise, his identity as a Lupin werewolf would have been exposed.
How dare you?
Sirius angrily grabbed Peter by the collar and punched him hard in the nose. Peter screamed in pain. His nose was broken and blood and snot were pouring out of his nose. Sirius didn't stop there and punched Peter again, causing him to scream like a madman.
Help, he's trying to kill me so nobody knows the truth. Stop him.
Harry and the others were at a loss, and Ivan was worried that Peter would be killed, so he tried to comfort him. Suddenly, the door to the shrieking shack flew open, and a voice called out to them.
Peter.
They all turned to see Lupin, looking sickly pale and clutching a wand, wearing a patchwork robe. Sirius was not surprised to see Lupin, as he was the one who had invited him, although he was sharp enough to notice that something was amiss.
What's the matter with you, Lupin? Are you all right?
Sirius asked him, frowning in confusion as he threw Peter aside.
I just took the wolf venom potion. I've been in bad shape for the past few days.
Lupin shook his head, indicating that he was fine. Ivan interrupted them with emphasis.
The authentic wolfsbane potion does not have such a debilitating effect. You may have been tricked by Snape.
Lupin said with a bitter smile. He transformed once a month, and the potion Snape gave him had the side effects of weakening him, but at least it suppressed his ferocity, which was good enough for him. It had to be known that the authentic wolf venom potion was not cheap. He had just become a professor and was not very well off. After wandering for many years, he had developed the habit of saving whatever he could. Lupin then turned to Harry and the others and said apologetically,
I'm sorry for hiding it from you for so long. I was worried that my status as a werewolf would cause panic, so I chose to keep it a secret.
Disregarding the pain, Peter Pettigrew's twisted face lit up with excitement, and he pointed at Lupin and exclaimed,
Did you see that? He admitted it. He admitted he's a werewolf.
Even if Professor Lupin is a werewolf, it doesn't prove anything. There are good and bad people in any race. The notion that werewolves are evil is just a prejudice of many wizards. I believe Professor Lupin is a good man.
Hermione interrupted Peter and addressed Harry and the others.
Right, Harry Rons?
That's right, Lupin is the best defense against the dark arts professor I've ever seen.
Remembering Lupin's conscientious teaching and his usual self-care, Harry quickly made his choice. After all, his best friend and most trusted professor came out and told him that Sirius was innocent and that Peter was the one who had betrayed his parents. This caused the wavering balance in Harry's mind to shift completely in Sirius's favor. Ron nodded dumbly, still unable to believe that his beloved mouse had turned into a bald old man.
Hales, you're clever enough to believe me, right? Save it, Peter.
Chapter 423, Poor, Innocent, and Evil Peter. Peter's tragic death did not elicit much sympathy from the crowd, and Sirius managed to keep him alive despite his murderous intent. Lupin, on the other hand, looked at Harry and the others with gratitude. He did not expect them to trust him even after his identity as a werewolf had been exposed. In an attempt to completely clear up the misunderstanding, Lupin and Sirius gave Harry a detailed account of the incident, leaving little to chance other than the fact that it was inconvenient to talk about the Order of the Phoenix.
Why did you suddenly choose him to be the secret keeper?
According to Sirius and Lupin, Peter was cowardly, weak, and useless. Even if the secret keeper had to be changed, it should be Lupin.
You should have heard what Peter said earlier. There was a traitor in the resistance against Lord Voldemort, and he was feeding information to you-know-who.
Because of his status as a werewolf, I suspected him, and thus excluded him from the selection of a secret keeper.
Sirius explained, looking at Lupin apologetically. I beg your forgiveness, Remus.
It's okay, I doubted you too, we're even.
Lupin shook his head. With that, the two looked at each other and smiled bitterly. It was this suspicion that made Peter the secret keeper, the least suspicious of James's friends.
Anyway, it's all my fault.
Sirius said, looking at Harry with remorse.
No, you didn't.
Harry shook his head with conviction.
It was Peter Pettigrew who betrayed you and my father and his friends.
There was a moment of silence, except for Hermione, who thought of the best thing to do at the moment.
Now that everything is clear, let's go and tell Professor McGonagall to inform the Ministry and clear Mr. Black's name.
Harry nodded quickly, not wanting to wait a moment longer.
We can't do that, not now.
Ivan stopped them.
Why?
Harry looked at Yvonne in surprise and confusion.
And I've been meaning to ask, if you knew, why didn't you say so? Of course they're worried about the Ministry of Magic getting in the way.
Ivan sighed, then proceeded to explain to Harry and the others what was at stake. The Ministry of Magic does not slap itself in the face, and in the face of such a major scandal without outside help, they would rather hide it than admit it.
It can't be that bad, can it? It's the Ministry of Magic.
Hermione said hesitantly, pursing her lips. Everything Ivan had just said hit her hard, and Hermione, accustomed to rules, found it hard to swallow.
The Ministry of Magic is not as fair as you think, Hermione. The truth of the matter does not matter to many politicians. They only care which outcome works in their favor. It is what they do best to turn black into white.
Ivan cruelly tore Hermione's imagination to shreds and laid the cold, hard truth before the 13-year-old witch. Harry and Ron, who also had their views of the world reshaped, found it hard to believe that the Ministry of Magic would distort the truth. Cough, cough.
We have come to a decision regarding this matter. We will simply wait for Dumbledore to return and leave it to him. How long do we have to wait? What if Professor Dumbledore doesn't come back for months?
Harry frowned, worried. Ivan shrugged, unable to reply. As headmaster of Hogwarts, Dumbledore was unlikely to be absent for months on end.
Very soon.
Lupin said suddenly. Everyone turned to look at him in surprise, and Lupin told them the truth.
I've just received word today that Professor Dumbledore should be back by tonight. To be on the safe side, we'll only have to wait here for one night, then we can go and see him early tomorrow morning. Really, that's great.
Harry said happily. Hermione, Ron, and even Sirius were relieved to hear the news, as if a weight had been lifted from their shoulders. This is also true of Ivan, who has always been reluctant to meet Dumbledore, although he has to admit that Dumbledore has a wonderful sense of security. It was as if he didn't have to worry about anything as long as he was around.
Peter has defected to you-know-who, so he should have the dark mark on him. If he can't use the Veritasrum in court, this will be enough proof.
Chapter 424, Peter, It's Too Hard for Me. Sirius strode over to Peter and forced his sleeve open, only to find nothing on Peter's meaty wrist.
It's not here.
Sirius was not surprised. As an undercover agent, Peter could not have placed the dark mark in such an obvious place. He then roughly ripped Peter's shirt off and tried to examine his chest and arms, but Peter struggled and screamed. As if he had broken through a certain threshold, Peter's body began to shrink and he transformed into a rat. The ropes binding his body automatically fell off.
Change back, Peter, if you don't want to die already.
Sirius hissed, reaching out to grab the gray rat by the tail. Peter tried to dodge in terror, but the debilitating spell Ivan had placed on him was still working, making him much slower than the average mouse. Suddenly, there was a flash of red light, and Sirius, caught off guard, was thrown back against the low wall.
Who?
Everyone was shocked by the sudden turn of events. Ivan immediately waved his wand and shot a magical beam of light towards the door, where the red light had come from.
Professor.
Hermione stammered.
Very well, come and see what I have found.
Snape said, ignoring Hermione. He glanced around the room, his eyes resting briefly on Sirius, then on Ron, who was tied up, and Harry, who had been crying.
Lupin, I was right. You were the one who helped Black sneak into the castle. I just didn't expect you to be so bold as to use this old place as your sanctuary.
Snape's face was filled with uncontrollable glee. After enduring for half a year, he finally had something on Lupin. Not surprisingly, Lupin and Sirius will be sent to Azkaban together today, and the Dementors will probably be happy to give them a kiss. Nothing would please him more than this. Lupin's face fell at Snape's words. He had not expected Snape to be following him. It was the bottle of wolf venom. Lupin soon realized this, as he had been weakened by the wolfsbane potion Snape had given him. He did not notice that he was being followed.
Severus, you've got the wrong idea. I'm guessing you didn't hear us when you arrived. Sirius didn't come to kill Harry. Peter did everything.
A look of eagerness came over Lupin's face, but he was interrupted by Snape.
Don't try to trick me. Peter's dead, and so is James. It's just the two of you, and when I've finished with you, there won't be any more nonsense.
Snape shouted.
Professor Lupin didn't lie to you. Peter is the real traitor.
Harry tried to speak up.
Shut up, Potter. As I recall, you're supposed to be in Hogwarts Castle, under the noses of all the professors.
Who was? Everyone was shocked by the sudden turn of events. Ivan immediately waved his wand and shot a magical beam of light towards the door, where the red light had come from.
Professor Snape, didn't you hear Peter outside? He's an animagus, and now he's turned into a rat.
Ivan said anxiously, his eyes, unlike the others, fixed on Peter's movements. The gray-black rat was slowly crawling towards the exit, its body weak. Ivan raised his wand, ready to strike. However, this struck a nerve with Snape, as he was standing at the exit and Ivan's wand was vaguely pointed at him.
That's enough. Do you think I'll believe this nonsense? You'd better not move around. When I've tied you all up, I'll consider listening to your explanations.
Chapter 425, Peter, It's Too Hard for Me, 2 in 4,000. With this in mind, Snape attacked without warning, sending a white beam of light straight at Lupin. Due to his poor condition, Lupin was slow to react and was only able to create a barrier of magic to block the attack before the beam hit him and knocked him to the ground. Ivan saw that Lupin had been attacked and Peter had slipped close to the door, so he did not hesitate.
A flock of birds.
Ivan waved his wand, and since he was dealing with Snape and Peter, he did not use a fatal spell. The piles of debris and planks around them transformed rapidly under the influence of magic, and in a matter of moments, flocks of birds had gathered, swarming towards the door like arrows.
Hales, I didn't think you'd collude with Black. It seems you're the one who brought these idiots, Potter and Weasley, here.
As Snape spoke, his hands did not stop moving, and he struck out a few charms with his backhand, even wondering if he should use some high-intensity jinxes. After all, Ivan was far more powerful than he had expected. He originally thought that even though Ivan was talented and far stronger than his peers, he was only at the level of an ordinary adult wizard or even an Auror. He did not expect that he would not be able to take him down in a short period of time. Ivan used his wand to guide a round table to block Snape's attack. Ivan had seen Peter's furious escape through the door, so he was both anxious and helpless when Snape blocked his way. He had Dobby watching over him, but that was not 100% insurance policy. Like Snape, who managed to sneak in with the help of the disillusionment charm, which Dobby failed to notice.
Expelliarmus.
Lupin, still lying on the ground, seized the moment and swung his wand at Snape. Unable to dodge, Snape was hit head-on, and the shield charm lit up around him, blocking the spell. However, due to the previous battle, the shield charm's protection had been reduced significantly, and it soon shattered after absorbing the power of the disarming charm. Snape was knocked back several steps, escaping the clutches of the basilisk's eye. Feeling his body stiffen, Snape felt a deep sense of dread. He had never heard of a spell that could petrify a person with just a look. Ivan had closed his snake eyes and was breathing heavily. The use of the basilisk eye on Snape once again showed Ivan the drawback of the basilisk eye, which was that it was best not to use it on people whose magic far exceeded their own. In less than a second, he had lost a third of his magic, and Snape did not seem to have lost his ability to fight.
Stop it, Severus. It's a misunderstanding. We have no reason to fight.
Lupin advised.
Waste of time.
Snape's face fell and he scowled at first, then he spoke with disdain.
Very well, it seems my holding back gave you the illusion that you could easily defeat me. Remus, times have changed, and numbers do not work so well.
As Snape spoke, he seemed to remember something, and his expression became ferocious. He raised his stiff wrist, and an invisible blade began to form at the tip of his wand.
Today is the day you and Black die, and no one can save you.
Snape's voice roared.
That may not be true, sir.
A high-pitched, strange voice suddenly sounded from the doorframe behind him. Snape's face fell and he felt a violent blow to his waist. His wand flew out of his hand, and his body was thrown against a rotting cupboard.
Well done, Dobby.
Ivan was so relieved to see this that he immediately transformed his wand into a rope and tied Snape up. Lupin also put away his wand and hurried to check on Sirius.
Professor Snape, if you could put aside your prejudice against Professor Lupin and Sirius, and think about it, you would know that we are not lying to you.
Ivan explained with a shrug. Snape didn't reply. He couldn't move, but he glared at Ivan and the others.
I think he needs to be taught a lesson before he'll behave himself.
Sirius stood up with Lupin's help, furious at the thought of being knocked out by Snape's sneak attack.
Save it.
Ivan snapped.
Don't add to the mess. If it weren't for your nasty jokes in the past, we wouldn't be in this mess today. You even told him about that.
Chapter 426. Ivan, Malfoy, how many people did you call? In fact, Sirius was indeed planning to get even with Peter, as he was furious at Peter for trying to escape in the chaos. Ivan suddenly thought of something and looked at Snape to ask.
By the way, Professor Snape, where is Malfoy now? Didn't he come with you?
After Ivan's reminder, Lupin and the others remembered that there was still a problem. Sirius's attention was drawn to it, and he put Peter's punishment on hold. Snape sneered at them but made no move to speak.
If you don't want me to do something special.
Sirius grabbed Snape by the collar and pushed his wand against Snape's forehead, worried that there would be no reason for Snape to knock him out.
Calm down, Sirius, we're in enough trouble as it is.
Lupin said to Snape, stopping Sirius from overreacting.
We really mean you no harm, Severus. We just don't want to inflate the misunderstanding. If you could, please tell us what Malfoy told you in the first place, and who he told the news to. Don't be a hypocrite, Lupin.
Snape said sarcastically. Although he had already guessed from Ivan and the others' subsequent words that they might not be lying, he would never give in front of his two sworn enemies. Sirius tried to punch him, but Lupin stopped him. Snape stared at Sirius, half teasing and half teasing.
There's no harm in telling you. I had an idea that Lupin was coming to see you when Malfoy came to inform me that he was going out.
By the way, Professor Snape, where is Malfoy now? Didn't he come with you? After Ivan's reminder, Lupin and the others remembered that there was still a problem. Sirius's attention was drawn to it, and he put Peter's punishment on hold. Snape sneered at them but made no move to speak. If you don't want me to do something special,
Severus.
Flitwick exclaimed, looking around as quickly as he could. The first thing they saw was Snape tied up, Ron and Hermione cowering in a corner, having avoided a fight. Black, a wanted criminal from the Ministry of Magic, was standing with Lupin, looking as though he was about to do something to Snape. Remembering what Malfoy had told him, Flitwick decided that he was too late. He had heard Snape talking to Lupin, Sirius, and the others, and had rushed over as fast as he could to help Snape. However, Snape was defeated and tied up.
Stupefy.
Flitwick ran through several battle plans in his head, then decided to take the lead and attack Lupin and Black. The beam of the charm flashed and intersected in the small room.
So why did you come alone? Where are McGonagall and the others?
Snape said angrily, glaring at Flitwick. Flitwick's expression was one of embarrassment. He was confident in his abilities and worried that Snape would not be able to cope on his own, so he left first.
Don't worry too much, Severus. I've asked Malfoy to alert the other professors. They'll be here before you know it.
Flitwick said soothingly. Snape had a strange expression on his face. Why did that sound so familiar? He had just said the same thing.
What's going on?
It seemed that he had another person to explain to. More importantly, if other professors saw this, they would probably misunderstand even more.
Harry, why don't you explain this to Professor Flitwick?
Chapter 426, Part 2. Ivan, Malfoy, how many people did you call? Instead, it would be easier to disarm the other party in a 4-on-1 situation where they had the absolute advantage, and then let Harry explain. Based on this belief, in just 10 minutes, the professors who rushed over were caught. Hooch and Trelawney came as a team, but were unable to escape, as Sirius used the cloak of invisibility that Harry had brought with him to make the battle go smoothly. The professors who were caught ended up in a semicircle listening to Harry's story.
So who's going to tell me what's really going on?
Mrs. Hodge, a new arrival, is baffled. She learned of this from Malfoy and followed the trail of clues she had left behind, only to be subdued by Ivan, Lupin, Black, and Dobby. When Hodge saw Snape, Flitwick, and the others, he was so shocked that he thought Hogwarts would be finished tomorrow.
Well, Madam Hooch, Sirius, who is wanted by the Ministry of Magic, is actually innocent, starting 13 years ago.
Harry had forgotten how many times he had told Sirius this, but he managed to suppress his annoyance in order to clear Sirius's name.
Potter, I suggest you skip the first part and start at the point. I've heard it a few times, and you can't just start at the beginning every time someone comes.
Flitwick interrupted unhappily. Flitwick was sick of hearing the beginning of this story, but even now he still has no idea what really happened back then.
Phileas.
Madam Hooch rebuked Flitwick, then asked curiously.
By the way, who told Malfoy to call us? I told Malfoy to inform you, but I didn't tell you to come in batches.
Snape could not contain his rising anger. This was not what he had expected. Trelawney, who had not been part of the discussion, suddenly spoke mysteriously.
SHHH, stop arguing. Why don't we guess who's coming in next? I saw a sign through a crack in the wall that our savior will be the fourth to cross the threshold.
So how come you didn't see this coming?
Snape mocked. Choking, Trelawney stared at him for a long moment, then muttered.
How do you know I didn't predict this? My capture could be a sign of fate.
Ivan looked at the assembled professors and sighed, wondering if Malfoy had invited every professor he could find. Most of the professors at the school are here.
Relax, don't even think about resisting. I'm not going to do anything to you.
Sirius deftly confiscated Sprout's wand, but did not bind her, instead gesturing for her to join Snape and the others, now that she had lost her weapon. Flitwick sighed helplessly and moved to the side, making room.
Anyone else?
Sirius asked Sprout, turning sharply to him. Sprout pursed her lips and tried to shake her head, but Malfoy's panicked voice rang out from outside the door. Sprout suddenly turned and shouted.
Malfoy, run.
She had realized that there might be others lying in wait in the shrieking shack, and that Malfoy, who had come with her, must have been spotted. Malfoy, however, was unable to escape and was soon caught by Dobby.
How dare you lay a hand on me, Dobby? I should have had my father kill you.
Malfoy cursed as he crossed the threshold and was shoved into the room. Malfoy, however, was stunned when he saw the circle of professors. Snape, Flitwick, and Hooch all stared at Malfoy, as they would not have been there if he had not passed on the information.
All the people you've called are here, aren't they? Malfoy, how many people did you call?
Ivan asked when he finally caught the culprit. Malfoy snapped, his eyes rolling.
Tell me the truth, or are you tired of living?
Ivan asked, drawing his wand and deliberately scaring off a dark glow. Malfoy, mistaking Ivan's intention to cast a jinx on him, was so frightened that he shook his head and said,
No one else.
After forcing him to answer several times, Ivan confirmed that Malfoy was most likely telling the truth, so he put away his wand and waved him away.
Looks like it's finally over.
Lupin said, relieved to hear Ivan and Malfoy talking. Lupin was under a lot of pressure to attack his fellow Hogwarts students, and more importantly, he was worried that Malfoy would spread the word about him being a werewolf. Fortunately, things were not so bad, and the only people who knew about it were the professors and Malfoy.
Well, all that's left is for Harry to explain things to the professors, and it should be fine.
Ivan nodded, finally able to relax after all the fuss.
You might want to explain something to me, Hales.
The voice behind him startled Ivan, and he instinctively cast a stunning spell. The newcomer extended his wand and tapped it lightly, causing the scarlet beam of light to vanish.
Professor Dumbledore.
Chapter 427, The Weird Dumbledore.
Albus. Professor Dumbledore.
The crowd gasped when they saw Dumbledore. However, while they were pleasantly surprised, the professors couldn't help but look ashamed. So many of them had been informed to capture Sirius, but in the end, they were all disarmed and captured.
Professor Dumbledore, Lupin is actually a werewolf, and he's been colluding with the Ministry's fugitive, Black, to lure everyone here.
Malfoy, despite his dislike of the headmaster on a normal day, had long since forgotten his usual complaints, and Dumbledore was immediately elevated to the status of a great savior. As he spoke, Malfoy glared at Ivan and the others, his face full of relief at having escaped with his life, mixed with excitement. He felt that his sworn enemy Ivan would definitely be fired and even imprisoned in Azkaban.
You're finished, Harles.
Malfoy shouted. Unfortunately, Dumbledore merely nodded, indicating that he knew, and did not, as Malfoy expected, cast a spell to bind Ivan and the others. Ivan was a little surprised at Dumbledore's attitude, but did not dare to slight him and quickly defended himself.
Professor Dumbledore, here's the thing. I accidentally found out that Ron's pet mouse was actually an animagus, and I investigated it out of curiosity and concern, forcing him to revert to his true form.
Yvonne explained everything she had come up with to Dumbledore. Ivan had barely spoken when Dumbledore interrupted.
A moment's pause, Hales. I did intend to hear you out, but not here, not now.
Dumbledore stressed the words. Ivan looked at the headmaster strangely, unable to understand him. Why did it have to be in the headmaster's office, where it was inappropriate? Was it because there were things that could not be overheard by children like Ron and Malfoy? However, they were already involved. They could not let this misunderstanding continue.
Dear professors, when you return to the castle, remember to call all the students to the Great Hall and maintain order. I have some important announcements to make. Also, if you have any questions, please wait until then.
Flitwick, Hooch, and the others looked at each other. Sprout, who had just been caught and did not understand anything, was even more confused. However, Dumbledore had already made the arrangements, and out of trust, they were the only ones who could hold back their doubts.
Good, that's it then. I'll see you at Hogwarts Castle in an hour.
Dumbledore nodded, taking in the crowd's reactions. With that, Dumbledore waved his wand and disappeared into the shrieking shack. There was a slight flicker of golden light, and Ivan saw that Dumbledore's right hand, which he had used to cast the spell, was holding something shiny and golden. He had a vague idea what it was, but he wasn't sure.
Albus is gone, what do we do now?
Sprout asked, frowning at Sirius and the others warily.
Go back to school and do as he says.
Flitwick said helplessly, not expecting Dumbledore to leave so quickly. Flitwick then looked back at Harry.
If you don't mind, I'd like to hear the rest of that story later on the road. Of course.
Harry nodded quickly. Sirius and Lupin returned the confiscated wands and apologized to all of them, with the exception of Snape, who was scowling. Ivan took Peter, who had transformed into a mouse, from Dobby's hands and returned to Hogwarts through the secret passage in the Shrieking Shack. Along the way, Harry told everyone what had happened, and this time it went well.
My God, is this true? How could the Ministry do this? They took a hero who resisted you-know-who into Azkaban as a traitor. Didn't you defend yourself in court?
Madame Hooch looked at Sirius and exclaimed that she could not believe Harry was telling the truth.
They'd have to give me the chance. When the Ministry caught me, they threw me straight at the Dementors without even going through the tribunal.
Sirius said sarcastically.
This is an absolute Ministry dereliction of duty. Every prisoner is required to go through a trial to be convicted.
Professor Sprout exclaimed angrily. The others looked at Sirius with sympathy. Having been imprisoned in Azkaban for more than 10 years due to Ministry dereliction of duty, Sirius was a tough nut to crack. Sirius did not dwell on this, as his ordeal in Azkaban was a form of self-punishment, which made him feel better and less guilty about what had happened. As they conversed, the professors who learned the truth slowly let down their guard. Ivan suddenly spoke up.
We're almost there, everyone stop. The front exit is planted with whooping willow, and if we go out like this, we may be attacked.
Chapter 428, Schrodinger's Headmaster. When they returned to the castle, they split up. The professors informed the students of Dumbledore's instructions, and Ivan and the others headed for the headmaster's office. In an attempt to prevent panic, Sirius transformed into the form of a large black dog. The sight of a large black dog walking through the castle was strange, but with Lupin, Ivan, and the others by his side, the young wizards he met along the way did not come up to ask questions, so he arrived at the headmaster's office without any trouble.
Professor Lupin, do you know what the password is?
Ivan asked when he saw Lupin.
I do know one, but Dumbledore hasn't been back for a while, and I'm not sure if the password will still work.
Lupin hesitated, trying to speak.
A cockroach pile.
Craig?
Professor Dumbledore.
Ivan called out. The white-bearded old wizard inclined his head slightly, his eyes scanning the room, and then he extended his hand, indicating that he was ready to speak. Ivan nodded and began with his discovery of Peter Pettigrew's name on the Marauder's map in his previous school year, and how he had been able to find out the truth of the matter by following the various clues.
Sirius, I'm sorry, it was my mistake.
Sirius says, not blaming Dumbledore. He was the one who temporarily replaced James without telling anyone, indirectly causing the deaths of James and Lily.
I appreciate your understanding.
Dumbledore sighed, standing up and addressing the crowd.
Well, I think it's time to clear up this misunderstanding and join me in the Great Hall. That's great, Sirius, you don't have to hide anymore.
Harry exclaimed, turning to Sirius with a look of pure joy. Sirius was equally delighted, having been tracked by the Ministry of Magic and living in constant fear. More importantly, once he got rid of his status as a fugitive, he would be able to meet Harry openly. He had heard from Ivan that his uncle-in-law's adoption would not be good for him, and he might be able to get Harry to move in with him.
Hales, you'll stay here. The letters and things on the table are for you. When you've read them, come to the Great Hall.
Chapter 429, Ivan, your daddy Dumbledore.
I'll be damned if I'll be surprised.
Ivan yelled, slamming his hands on the table. He had gone through all this trouble just to throw the blame on Dumbledore and be left to rot in the background, only to have it thrown back at him. As for how Dumbledore knew about what had happened here, Ivan speculated that it had something to do with the time turner. With the time turner in his possession, he could not even tell when the letter was from Dumbledore.
This is.
Ivan asked, picking out a white hair and examining it. Dumbledore most likely sent this to facilitate his use of Polyjuice Potion. However, it seemed that the old principal was not omniscient. He had miscalculated this time. He did not even need the Polyjuice Potion to transform into his appearance.
But what should we do about Sirius?
Ivan was more troubled by this than by the benefits of being headmaster. The meaning of Dumbledore's note to him was clear. It implied that he could simply write a letter to the Ministry of Magic and convince them to reopen the case. However, no matter how fast the court moved, it was impossible for them to go to trial tomorrow. The ministry was bound to hear about it, so he had to find a way to put pressure on them to prevent them from trying anything clandestine. The more Ivan thought about it, the more troubled he became, as Dumbledore was too big-hearted to leave Sirius's rehabilitation to Ivan. What could possibly be more important than this? Ivan thought about this worriedly, but then shook his head. As the most powerful wizard in the wizarding world, Dumbledore was unlikely to have any problems. As Ivan considered his options, he gathered the letters on the table and left the headmaster's office for the Great Hall. During this time, the professors of each subject had followed orders and summoned the young wizards of the 4 academies to the Great Hall. For a time, the place was very lively, with students all talking about what had happened, and everyone was relieved to hear that Headmaster Dumbledore had summoned them. When Sirius infiltrated Gryffindor's dormitory a few days ago, the Dementors went on a rampage, and Dumbledore, the mainstay of the household, did not return. Now that they knew the headmaster had returned, they could finally relax.
Hales over here.
George and Fred were waving at him from the Gryffindor table. When Ivan approached them, they eagerly approached him and questioned him.
Is it true that Sirius was caught?
What makes you think that?
Yvonne asked, surprised.
Because many professors have been seen heading in the same direction and are now returning together, we suspect that they must be after Sirius.
George exclaimed. I'm sorry, but they didn't go to arrest anyone. They were caught. Ivan shook his head with an odd look on his face, refusing to answer their questions and instead refusing to listen to what Professor Dumbledore had to say later. George and Fred gave up when Ivan refused to talk about it. Before long, Dumbledore, who was speaking to the professors on the stage, stepped forward and pointed his wand at his throat.
Silence.
His loud voice echoed throughout the Great Hall, attracting the attention of the young wizards below. Dumbledore cleared his throat and continued.
I'm sure you've all read the Ministry's notice about the fugitive from Azkaban, Black, but I think you may not know everything. It all starts with the Wizarding War over a decade ago.
Dumbledore's sudden change of tone surprised the young wizards, who soon became absorbed in the story he was telling. When they learned that Harry's parents were being hunted for resisting the Dark Lord, the young wizards of the 4 houses discussed the matter with worried expressions. It was not until Dumbledore said that the Jameses had used a powerful spell to secure the house that everyone breathed a sigh of relief.
Professor, in that case, how did Harry's parents die?
Several bold, young Gryffindor wizards ventured to ask. Others cast puzzled looks, as it was common knowledge in the wizarding world that Harry's parents had been killed by you-know-who. How did they die if the spell was as powerful as Dumbledore claimed and was able to hide them from sight?
Because someone betrayed us and told Voldemort where James was hiding.
Chapter 430, Exposing Peter Pettigrew. When Dumbledore mentioned the man's name, the young wizards panicked. However, the thought of the Dark Lord's worst enemy standing in the stands reassured them, and they began to discuss who the traitor was.
It must be Black.
Percy exclaimed, immediately thinking of Black, who was on the run. More and more people guessed this and spoke out angrily against Black, thinking he was a disgraceful villain.
Yes, there have been many others in the past, including myself.
Dumbledore paused, his voice rising as he continued.
However, my investigation revealed that the traitor was someone else, and the Ministry of Magic made the wrong decision in locking Black up in Azkaban without trial. Based on this, I owe Mr. Black an apology for part of my mistake.
Dumbledore finally added. When Dumbledore finished speaking, there was dead silence and all the young wizards were shocked speechless, wondering if they had misheard. Sirius, wanted by the Ministry of Magic, is actually innocent. How was this possible? When Black sneaked into the castle the other day, intending to kill Harry.
Silence.
Dumbledore cleared his throat, drawing everyone's attention once more.
I know this news is shocking, and you may have a lot of doubts, but it would be inappropriate for me to explain, so I think it would be best to let the person involved elaborate.
Dumbledore clapped his hands, and the doors of the Great Hall flew open. Sirius, dressed in a long black robe, strolled through the door and down the aisle from where the heads of the 4 great colleges were seated. He was holding a struggling rat in his right hand. Harry, on the other hand, followed him nervously. Despite Sirius's unusual appearance, many clever young wizards were able to guess what he was up to based on Dumbledore's words.
He's the fugitive, Black.
Seamus screamed from the front row. Sirius turned to look at him, causing Seamus to shiver, but Seamus soon realized that Sirius was only smiling gently at him without saying anything.
I can't believe that Black is with Harry. It seems that Professor Dumbledore was telling the truth.
As the crowd discussed the match, Sirius and Harry entered the stands, and Dumbledore moved to the side to make room for them. Harry took a few nervous steps forward and summoned up his courage.
What Professor Dumbledore said was true. I thought Black was a murderer through and through, just like you, and hated him for revealing my parents' whereabouts to Voldemort.
Harry's speech became more and more fluent, and his words were so infectious that many people agreed with him.
So,
"It must be Black," Percy exclaimed, immediately thinking of Black who was on the run. More and more people guessed this and spoke out angrily against Black, thinking he was a disgraceful villain.
but Peter Pettigrew is dead.
A Hufflepuff wizard near the front protested, jumping to his feet.
My mother once told me that he was incompetent but brave when it mattered, and that he went after Black alone and was killed.
No, it's not like that.
Sirius, who had been silent for a long time, finally spoke. He looked at the Hufflepuff wizard and felt that he was most likely the son of an old friend who knew about the past. However, this was not the time, so Sirius quickly replied.
Peter Pettigrew is not dead, but has gone into hiding, and now I have him, and he is here.
Sirius threw the rat up into the air and waved his wand, sending a blinding light towards Scabbers. The rat screamed like a mad thing, and then, in front of everyone, transformed into a squat, bald, middle-aged wizard. The young wizard sitting nearby squeezed back in fear.
As you can see, Peter Pettigrew is an unrecorded animagus who managed to trick the Ministry, as well as all of us, by transfiguring into a mouse. After hiding in the home of a wizard for over a decade, he eventually became Mr. Weasley's pet.
Some of the lesser witches and wizards turned to look at Ron. Many of the lesser Gryffindor witches and wizards had seen him playing with his rat on occasion, and had even brought it with him when he showered. Ron stood up with a look of disgust and nodded to confirm this. On the other side of the room, Percy Weasley's face fell. Scabbers had also been following him around as a pet for a while, but fortunately, he had given Ron the rat years ago.
God, this is disgusting.
George looked at Peter, who was filthy, short, and fat, and felt sick at the thought that Peter had been in the house for so long without being discovered.
Yes, Mother would be horrified if she knew.
Chapter 431, Ivan, I'm not pretending anymore, I'm the best student Hogwarts has ever seen.
No, it's not that. Black is lying, they're liars.
Peter lay trembling in the middle of the aisle, facing everyone's looks of disgust, suspicion, and disdain. Sirius sneered as he lifted Peter up and tore off his clothes.
Ugh.
The girls shrieked, covering their eyes with their hands and only daring to peer through the tiny gaps between their fingers.
This is the dark mark, proof of the Death Eaters.
Black exclaimed, pointing to the skull mark on Peter's left arm. The design of the dark mark was very strange, as if a serpent had slithered out of the skull's mouth and formed an 8-character inner ring on its arm. A young wizard in the front row was so frightened that he fell out of his seat, and the other students were speechless with fear.
Mr. Black was right, this is the dark mark. You may not have seen this before, but I'm sure your parents remember it well. That's why I'm so sure Peter was the betrayer.
Dumbledore then turned to Sirius and said,
Mr. Black, please fix Peter's clothes so as not to scare the children.
Sirius nodded, then roughly pulled Peter's shirt back and spat on it. As Peter's identity was revealed, Ivan watched the spectacle in silence, marveling at the wonders of time. He had just come up with a concrete plan for a public opinion offensive against the ministry in the headmaster's office. Now that I'm sitting in the Great Hall, my future self is once again using Dumbledore's identity to achieve all of this.
It is all thanks to one man. He was Hogwarts' finest student and youngest recipient of the Order of Merlin.
I'm not pretending anymore. I'm the best student Hogwarts has ever seen. No, it's not that. Black is lying. They're liars.
Ivan howls.
Ivan rose to his feet under the watchful gaze of the crowd, bowed slightly, and then spoke to Dumbledore in a very humble manner.
Professor Dumbledore, all I did was a little bit of work, fulfilling my duty as an accomplished student.
Ivan then turned his attention to Peter and continued in a righteous tone.
Moreover, as a member of the Order of Merlin, I cannot condone the dishonor of a traitor who faked his own death to receive the Order of Merlin and the accolades of the people. Therefore, I must reveal his true face.
Ivan's words, under the influence of the resounding charm, spread throughout the great hall and into the ears of every minor wizard, and soon there was thunderous applause. Malfoy, sitting at Slytherin House, was furious and jealous. Originally, he had discovered the identity of the Lupin werewolf and caught Ivan and the others having a secret rendezvous with the Ministry of Magic's fugitive, Black. Now, he should be the one standing up to receive the applause. But how did it suddenly come to this? Sirius's reputation was wiped clean, Ivan became a hero, and he was scolded by Snape for passing on the wrong information.
You are the most humble student I have ever met, Hales.
Dumbledore exclaimed as he applauded.
Given your contribution, I would add 300 points to Gryffindor.
300 points. The young witches and wizards sitting around the table were all amazed. This was definitely the highest single point scored at Hogwarts. Ivan's face lit up with joy, as he had just received a system notification that his GPA had increased by 300 points. This proved that giving yourself extra points was possible. The only disappointment for Ivan was that he did not receive the legendary title of Outstanding Cadet. He had bragged about it for nothing.
Why are you giving yourself points for pretending? You're the headmaster, can't you just find a reason?
Dumbledore turned back to the group and spoke.
I'd also like to apologize to Mr. Harles here. As I'm sure you all remember, I had to give him a point deduction for something that I didn't realize was a complete misunderstanding, so.
Chapter 432. Thank you, Fugitive Black, for the firebolt.
Well, that's all I have to say tonight. If you have any doubts, feel free to write to your parents about them.
Having given his instructions, Dumbledore dismissed the meeting and allowed them to return to their rooms. The prefects immediately stood up and ushered the junior wizards back to their rooms. Almost all of the junior wizards were talking about Sirius and Peter, and when the prefects scolded them, it didn't work. It can't be helped, Dumbledore's announcement was simply too shocking.
Do you really believe what Professor Dumbledore says, that Black is not a fugitive but a hero? Why not? Professor Dumbledore was very clear about it. Even Harry came forward to explain. He couldn't possibly have made a mistake about who his enemies were, could he? And that dark mark, it was horrible. But how could the ministry be wrong? Before I came to school, my mother told me to be careful not to run into Black.
Under the great shock and controversy, many young wizards and witches returned to their dormitories and spontaneously wrote letters asking for advice on this amazing incident.
Mr. Black, can you tell us how you defeated you-know-who and his regiment?
Hermione asked, suddenly intrigued.
If you'd like to hear it, sure.
Sirius nodded, thinking this was a good opportunity to get closer. Dumbledore once told him in the Great Hall to try to gain the trust of the students and influence their parents. In short, the more attention the trial attracted, the less likely the Ministry of Magic would try anything funny, which was why he was there. Sirius cleared his throat and tried to form the words to tell the tale. Since the Order's existence was, of course, a secret, these young wizards had no need to know, so in Sirius's story it was changed to a spontaneous civil resistance group.
I heard from my grandmother that my parents were involved in the fight against the Death Eaters. Is that true?
Neville asked weakly from his seat in the corner.
Yes, that's right, they were great heroes, strongest resistance.
Sirius continued with a silent sigh as he looked at Neville.
Sadly, after You-Know-Who's downfall, a number of insane Death Eaters tried to find out where You-Know-Who was and captured your parents, torturing them with the Cruciatus Curse. Your parents were very strong-willed and refused to reveal anything, but their minds were greatly affected.
Neville had curled up in a corner and was quietly sobbing as he listened to Sirius, and many of the young Gryffindor wizards were consoling and encouraging him. Sirius's story slowly comes to an end, beginning with the events around the time of Harry's birth, and his discussion with James that he would be Harry's godfather when Harry was born.
Wait, did you just say you're also my godfather?
Harry interrupted, looking at Sirius with surprise and delight.
Yes, it was promised to me and James before you were even born.
Sirius nodded solemnly, then seemed to think of something and asked again.
By the way, Harry, did you like the firebolt I gave you earlier? That firebolt was a gift from you.
Harry exclaimed in astonishment, turning to Ivan.
But I thought it was from Professor Dumbledore. Dumbledore, what makes you think that? Didn't you tell him the truth, Ivan?
Sirius asked, turning to Ivan with displeasure.
What was I supposed to say? That the fugitive from Azkaban, Sirius Black, had sent 2 brooms. You know, you didn't exactly impress Harry at the time.
Chapter 433, Phoenix Messenger. Sirius was momentarily tongue-tied and did not think much of the purchase, only wondering if Harry would be happy.
This is wonderful.
Harry said suddenly.
What?
Before Sirius could react, Harry threw himself at him and hugged him.
I mean your firebolt, I love it, it's fantastic. It's the best present I've ever had.
Harry exclaimed, hugging Sirius, his voice choked with emotion. In just one day, Harry's emotions were going up and down like he was on a roller coaster. He had just cleared up the misunderstanding when he found out that he had a godfather, a relative. Harry was overjoyed, which meant that he would be able to move out of his nasty uncle's house. It was almost something he dreamed about at night.
How dare they do this to you? Hasn't Dumbledore paid attention to your life since he sent you there?
Sirius was furious when he found out about Harry's life experience and swore that he would teach them a lesson once he was freed from this case. Harry didn't care much for the past, but Sirius's words warmed his heart.
Right, Sirius. Can I move in with you during the summer holidays this year?
Harry asked expectantly, then quickly added as an idea occurred to him.
Oh, I almost forgot. You've just escaped from Azkaban and have been disowned by your family. Perhaps you don't even have a house of your own. But never mind, we can always rent a room.
In Harry's opinion, it would be better to wander than to live with the Dursleys, not to mention the fact that he had his parents' inheritance, which Sirius could share with him at the Leaky Cauldron.
No.
Sirius laughed. Although he was expelled from the House of Black, he was the first heir to the title and had the right to control all of the family's properties, as all of his other living members were witches and were either married off or imprisoned in Azkaban. It was more money than he and Harry could spend in several lifetimes.
That's great,
said Harry, jumping for joy. Sirius was equally pleased, and he was thinking of a better life ahead of him, and the hardships he had endured seemed less difficult to accept.
That won't do. Sirius will have to go to the staff room and keep an eye on Peter, in case he gets away.
Before Sirius could reply, Ivan interrupted Harry with a shake of his head.
I'm sorry, Harry. Your Professor Dumbledore told me to do as I was told in the break room.
Sirius shrugged helplessly. Sirius was not surprised by Dumbledore's order, as he suspected that Dumbledore intended to groom Ivan as his heir. After all, Ivan's magical talent and adaptability were impressive to Sirius, which was unusual for a 13-year-old wizard.
There's plenty of time, Harry.
Sirius saw Harry's reluctance and laughed heartily.
We can talk tomorrow. We see each other every day.
Harry nodded, understanding that the most important thing now was to keep Peter under control, and said nothing more. Yvonne was relieved to see that the pair were sensible. Letting Sirius spy on Peter was just an excuse. Ivan had arranged for Dobby to keep an eye on Peter. Considering Dobby's limited intelligence and the possibility of being duped, Ivan ordered him to administer a stunning spell every 2 hours, ensuring that Peter would never wake up. There was no way Peter was going to get away with this. He had sent Sirius away because he might have to do something late at night. Sirius was not as easy to fool as Harry and Ron. By the time Sirius left the Gryffindor lounge, Ivan, having thought of a follow-up plan, excused himself from Harry and the others and headed to the headmaster's office, using the excuse that Dumbledore was looking for him.
A cockroach pile.
As Ivan read the password to enter the headmaster's office, the door to the passageway slowly opened. Ivan strode into the headmaster's office and retrieved Dumbledore's letter from the central desk drawer. He carefully placed his wand against the blank letter and slowly infused it with magic. Faint ink began to emerge from the parchment, and lines began to gather into words. It was written in Dumbledore's handwriting, and even the contents were self-polished and explained in Dumbledore's usual tone.
What a convenient and dangerous piece of magic.
Chapter 434, A.
Surprise.
For Dumbledore.
Fox, come here.
After writing the letter, Ivan folded the envelopes one by one and then waved Phoenix over. Fawkes flapped his way to the table in front of Yvonne and examined the envelopes curiously.
Do you see this list? Deliver the letters in this order, understand?
Ivan asked, indicating the list Dumbledore had left him. Fawkes nodded, picked up a letter, and burst into golden red flames. The next moment, the bird and the letter were gone. Before long, Fawkes was back with the next letter in his mouth, and so on.
How efficient.
Seeing that Fawkes had used instant transmission to deliver half of the letters in just 10 minutes, Yvonne's fondness for Phoenix blood grew. However, this was not the time to do so, as he only had 2 legendary points, and even if he was given enough Phoenix blood, he would not be able to complete the 4th ceremony. Without special means of preservation, the blood of magical creatures would become less active after 3 days, and the effects of fusion would be greatly reduced.
Wait, so the letters and the time turner haven't arrived yet.
Ivan, acutely aware of this, suddenly realized that if he stayed here for a while, he would be able to catch Dumbledore, who had come to place these things. Ivan, who was already unhappy with the old professor shifting the blame to him, immediately ignored everything else and hid in the headmaster's office. In any case, if he was delayed, he could just go back in time. Time was the last thing he lacked now. The wait, however, lasted for the better part of an hour, and Ivan was beginning to get impatient when the fireplace in the headmaster's office burst into flame, and a golden red flame leapt high into the air.
Deliver a letter to Rita Skeeter of the Daily Prophet telling her to drop everything and come to me at the Leaky Cauldron at once.
Ivan said. In the evening, the Leaky Cauldron was unusually noisy and reeked of alcohol. Tom, the landlord, treated every customer with great enthusiasm. The bar was full of empty beer bottles and the atmosphere was harmonious. Rita Skeeter, who entered the room, looked on with disgust. As a lady of good manners, she had never liked chaotic places like this.
Bloody brat.
Rita Skeeter cursed under her breath. If he hadn't threatened her with that, she wouldn't have left her job unfinished and come to this place.
Would you like a butter beer, Miss Skeeter?
Tom, the innkeeper, seemed to be drunk, and he greeted Rita with a laugh.
No.
Rita Skeeter haughtily refused Tom's offer and proceeded to ask.
May I know where room 7 is? I've been approached about something.
Well,
Tom replied with a shrug. Rita Skeeter nodded and went up to the 2nd floor, where she found the house number and complained as she opened the door.
Hales, why are you looking for me? Don't expect to threaten me with that.
However, when she saw who was waiting inside, Rita Skeeter's pupils constricted and she stammered.
Albus Dumbledore.
Ivan had disguised himself as Dumbledore and was amused at Rita Skeeter's reaction. On the surface, Ivan's expression was calm as he looked at Rita Skeeter and said,
that's right, I was the one who asked Hales to write and get you here to talk about something.
It occurred to Rita Skeeter that, although the letter contained the notes of Ivan the Imp, she had seen a golden red feather pressed against the envelope.
So?
Rita Skeeter quickly composed herself and sat opposite Ivan with a fake smile.
It says everything you need to know. Take a look.
Chapter 435. What? Dumbledore is going to be Minister for Magic. Puzzled, Rita Skeeter picked up the parchment and scanned it. Her expression froze, then changed to one of shock.
Is
Rita Skeeter's tone was strange, whether excited, panicked, or both.
I can assure you it is. We have Peter Pettigrew and the dark mark on his left arm.
Yvonne nodded, then giggled and teased him.
I think it's good news material, don't you? I'm afraid we'll have to print more copies of the Daily Prophet tomorrow.
Rita Skeeter's hands were shaking as she clutched the parchment. With the instincts of a news editor, she could only imagine the commotion it would cause if word of this got out. However, Rita Skeeter seemed to realize something, and her excited expression suddenly cooled.
What's wrong?
Ivan asked, noticing the change in Rita Skeeter's expression.
You should know that I'm just a small newspaper reporter. I can write for the Daily Prophet, but only if I'm vetted by an editor-in-chief.
Rita Skeeter adjusted her glasses and replied in disappointment. As a journalist, Rita Skeeter was very interested in such heavyweight news material, but having been in the profession for many years, she knew what she could and could not write about. Like the gossip stories of famous wizards, the chaotic private lives of high-ranking officials were news that could be reported. It would be easy to get into unnecessary trouble if it was reported that Sirius was attacking the entire Ministry of Magic. She did not want to lose her job at the newspaper she was so fond of.
You think Fudge will stay in his position after this?
What?
Rita Skeeter asked, unable to respond for a moment.
I have informed some of my old friends in the court of this case. Even without your report, I can pass it on to many wizarding families through the students of Hogwarts. The news should have spread by now.
Ivan went on. When she heard Yvonne's calm voice, Rita Skeeter was shocked. Her pupils contracted as she stared at the seemingly kind-looking centenarian in disbelief. A chill ran down her spine.
Are you really planning on taking up the post of Minister for Magic?
Instead of answering directly, Ivan made it plain that he resented the ministry's recent behavior.
Good, I can write about it.
Rita Skeeter immediately came to the conclusion that Sirius, who had been mistakenly imprisoned in Azkaban, would not be enough to affect Minister Fudge's position, but Dumbledore might be behind it. And Rita Skeeter didn't forget that he had something on her, so she had no choice. Thinking of this, Rita Skeeter hated that annoying brat, who had promised her not to tell anyone that she was an illegal animagus.
Wise choice.
Chapter 436. Why do you have to apologize to the British Isles?
Forgive me, Professor, for leaving this mess to me.
Ivan sighed. After all, he had no choice but to do this. Ivan then looked at the clock, decided it was almost time, and waved his wand to perform a transfiguration. When Ivan looked around again, he found himself in the shrieking shack, where a loud noise was coming from one of the rooms. Ivan adjusted his clothes, then sauntered in and spoke.
You might want to explain something to me, Hales.
The next morning, Ivan woke up with a yawn, washed up, and went to the Great Hall to enjoy breakfast as usual. However, today's situation was slightly different. As soon as Ivan sat down, he saw a large group of owls rushing into the Great Hall towards their respective targets, delivering letters to the long tables of the four houses. One of the owls flew accurately towards Ivan and landed on his shoulder. Ivan, unsurprised, reached out and removed the newspaper from the owl's foot. He had ordered a copy of the latest Daily Prophet yesterday to see if the other party had acted according to the agreement. Shocking, Ministry of Magic's big mistake. Azkaban fugitive black clearing his name today, real killer Peter Pettigrew caught at Hogwarts. Yvonne opened the paper and saw the headline, which took up a quarter of the page. Ivan was also pleased with the contents, which detailed how the secret keeper had been temporarily replaced, criticized the ministry for locking Sirius up in Azkaban without a trial, and suspected that something like Sirius Black was probably not alone. The entire article was scathing and sarcastic, and although there was no editor's signature on the bottom, Ivan immediately recognized it as Rita Skeeter's style. At the end of the article, Rita Skeeter wrote, "Even if a wicked mystic were to be caught by Aurors, he or she would have to go through a judicial justice trial to be convicted. The Ministry of Magic's abuse of power is punishable by an apology to the entire British wizarding community.
It was the right choice to choose Rita Skeeter.
Yvonne muttered to herself, wondering if Fudge would be furious if he read the article.
Sirius, come and see this. The Daily Prophet is reporting about you and Peter Pettigrew.
Sirius, who was catching up with Lupin at the teacher's table, raised his eyebrows at Harry's shout and stood up. Most of the Gryffindors welcomed Sirius with open arms, and after listening to his story for an entire night, their opinion of him changed. The young wizards from the other 3 academies stayed away from Sirius as he passed by. Sirius did not care, as he was well aware of how hard it was to remove an impression once formed, and could not change it in a short period of time. When Sirius sat down, Ivan handed him the newspaper.
Thanks.
Sirius was surprised when the Daily Prophet got hold of the news and reported it without being interviewed. Sirius, of course, knew more than Harry and the others, and was immediately moved when he guessed that Dumbledore must have used his influence to get things going. He knew exactly what the Daily Prophet was like, and it would not be easy to get their help.
There's also a mention of you on the second page, which says that the court has decided to reopen the case for you, which should be within the next few days.
Hermione reminded Sirius.
Does that mean you'll be cleared of all charges in a matter of days, Sirius?
Harry asked happily.
That's right.
Sirius laughed.
Since it's our day off, why don't we go to Hogsmeade to celebrate? We didn't have a good time there yesterday.
Ron suggested with some resentment.
Of course, no problem. I'll cover all the expenses this time as compensation for scaring you yesterday.
Sirius agreed, thinking it was a good idea, and offered to buy Ron a new pet. After all, Peter Pettigrew would either spend the rest of his life in Azkaban or be executed by the Ministry of Magic, and would never be Ron's pet again. Considering that he was partly to blame for Peter's death, Sirius asked Ron what kind of pet he wanted.
How about a nice fat rat? I could get one about the same size as Scabbers.
Sirius ventured, thinking of Ron's fondness for rats.
No, I don't want a rat.
Ron shook his head frantically. Ever since he had discovered that Scabbers was actually a middle-aged, bald-headed wizard transformed into a human, Ron's greatest fear had been mice, as opposed to spiders.
Or an owl.
Chapter 437, Ivan, Fudge, how dare you defame my innocence? The Ministry of Magic arrived far sooner than Ivan had expected, and he had only just finished breakfast when Fudge arrived. In other words, the Ministry of Magic should only have been in office for a short time, and the current minister had already rushed over. It was clear how much importance the ministry placed on this matter.
Ivan, is something wrong?
Hermione had also heard Fox's cry, and she recognized Dumbledore's phoenix. Sirius, Harry, and Ron stopped talking and looked at Ivan.
No, it's nothing. Professor Dumbledore wanted to see me about something. I think it's because the ministry couldn't wait and came early.
Yvonne stood up and reached out her hand, and Fox, who had flown in through the window, stopped on his arm. Ivan then looked at Sirius and spoke to them.
In addition, I think it would be best to postpone your celebration until after the trial. Sirius's name will not be cleared before the trial, so it would be best if he did not leave the school without permission, in case someone finds a reason to attack Professor Dumbledore.
At Ivan's words, Harry and the others, who had been in high spirits, wilted. Sirius realized this as well. He had been so happy that he had forgotten his status as a fugitive. If he had gone outside openly, he might have caused a scene.
Yes, it's quite like that. I don't suppose anyone will find out.
When the changes had stabilized, Ivan used Transfiguration to get a full-length mirror and examined it. After all, they were going to see Minister for Magic Fudge, which was different from fooling the professors at school. If they were exposed, they would be doomed. In keeping with Dumbledore's tastes, Ivan went so far as to put on a set of flashy purple robes to make himself look like a headmaster.
What do you think, Fox?
Yvonne asked, cocking her head at the phoenix with its golden red feathers. Fox stared at the mirror for a moment, then nodded. It gave nothing away. Ivan was relieved when he saw Minister for Magic Fudge approaching with a large group of Aurors. Yvonne frowned, knowing that Fudge was up to no good, but he quickly composed himself and went to meet him.
Cornelius, it's been a long time.
Ivan greeted them warmly, pretending not to notice the hostility on their faces. Fudge didn't appreciate it at all. He rushed to Ivan's side, his eyes blazing with anger, and closed the distance between them.
Albus,
Said Ivan, raising his eyebrows nonchalantly.
that's the job of a ministry orer.
Fudge interrupted angrily.
Don't ever say that, Cornelius. This is also a threat to the safety of all students, and as headmaster of Hogwarts, how can I ignore it? And I'm more than willing to do what I can for the wizarding community.
Ivan explained calmly.
Then you should have discussed it with me first, instead of going off on your own.
Fudge said hotly. Fudge knew full well that Dumbledore was responsible for the Daily Prophet's publication today, or they would not have dared publish such a thing without his permission.
How could I forget you, old friend? In fact, I've sent an owl with a letter from me to explain all of this to you.
Ivan went on in gentle tones.
What about your owl? I didn't see it.
Fudge demanded as if he had reached the end of his patience, and the string in his head was about to snap. When he arrived at the Ministry of Magic early this morning, he received hundreds of letters demanding to know the authenticity of the Daily Prophet's contents, including a large number of howlers. Fudge was even forced to send a commissioner to deal with the owls that tried to break into the Ministry of Magic, and to select the important letters to send to his office. But there were no letters from Dumbledore. In addition, the latest edition of the Daily Prophet had nearly driven him to his grave, which was why he had abandoned all his work and rushed here with the Aurors. In the face of Fudge's questioning, Ivan spoke with regret.
Perhaps Hogwarts is too far from the Ministry of Magic. The owl I sent will take some time to fly. If you hadn't come to me by now, you might already be reading that letter.
The ever-cautious Ivan would never give Fudge an excuse to get at him, so he really did send a letter to the ministry. Only the messenger owl had left Hogwarts only 10 minutes ago.
I heard from the editor of the Daily Prophet that you were the one who threatened them with this information. Is that what he told you? We had such a nice chat.
Ivan went on, looking at Fudge with wide, surprised eyes.
The editor-in-chief of the Daily Prophet told me that he was very willing to let you know the truths.
Chapter 438, Sirius One Caught Again.
Really? Then you'd better hope you're not mistaken.
Fudge ground his teeth, furious, but aware that he did not have sufficient excuse to confront Dumbledore.
But of course, I am quite confident in my judgment, and will take you to Peter now.
Ivan said, ignoring Fudge's impotent rage and making an inviting gesture. Fudge snorted and started walking towards the castle entrance, the other Aurors moving around Ivan to follow. Ivan was rebuffed, but he was too generous to take it personally. They entered the noisy Great Hall. As it was a day of rest, there was still a large number of wizards hanging around after breakfast. Sirius was there, chatting and laughing with some young Gryffindor wizards about his adventures with James and Lupin as students.
Blake.
When the Aurors behind Fudge saw that the wanted criminal they were after was openly in the Great Hall, they instinctively drew their wands and pointed them at each other. Such a large display frightened the young wizards in the Great Hall, and Ivan, seeing this, turned to Fudge.
Cornelius, I'm sure you've seen the news. Not only is Mr. Black not a murderer or traitor, but he has also been involved in numerous battles against the Death Eaters. I think he should be removed from the wanted list.
Who knows if it's true or not? Maybe it's a lie made up by Black. Anyway, he's still a suspect, isn't he? Lock him up.
Fudge sneered. He waved his hand and glanced at the Aurors behind him. The Aurors immediately understood and took out their magical shackles to put on Black. Ivan frowned and hesitated, but did not try to stop him. Because Sirius was indeed a suspect prior to his trial, Fudge's hold on him was perfectly reasonable and legal, and if he tried to stop him, Fudge would use the excuse of hindering ministry law enforcement against him. It can be seen from the way that the headstrong Fudge enthusiastically led his men to capture Dumbledore, that the power-addled fool had no regard for the difference in their abilities, and that his bluff might not work. So sometimes idiots are tougher than smart people.
You can't take him like this. Sirius is innocent.
As the Aurors were about to take Sirius away, Harry and the others rushed to stop them. The law enforcement Aurors were at a loss as to what to do, and no matter how much they scolded Harry and the others, they refused to let them go.
Well, if it isn't Potter.
Fudge pushed aside an Auror and approached them, speaking impatiently to Harry.
Please do not disturb the normal enforcement of Aurors, as we are trying to get justice for your parents.
Harry looked at him defiantly, not backing down.
I'll get Peter, now go away and stop causing trouble for us.
Harry's pestering caused Fudge to lose his patience, and he waved the Aurors away. It was then that Sirius spoke.
Harry, get out of the way. It's just a formality for them to catch me. Nothing will happen.
Despite the shackles on his hands, Sirius did not look worried, as if he had been invited somewhere rather than arrested. Harry looked at him for a moment, then looked at Dumbledore, who was standing nearby, and when the professor shook his head at him, Harry reluctantly took a few steps back. Fudge watched coldly, irritated by Harry's disregard for his words and Sirius's nonchalant attitude, feeling his authority being challenged.
I thought you were going to see Peter Pettigrew, Cornelius.
Ivan said suddenly.
We can go now.
Fudge nodded and ordered the other Aurors to take Sirius to the staff room. When they opened the door, they saw a short, fat, middle-aged wizard curled up in a corner, tied up by thin ropes.
What's going on?
Fudge turned to Ivan.
Pete Pettigrew was an unregistered animagus who could transform into a mouse, and was not useful in general supervision. To be on the safe side, I had him put under a stunning charm every 2 hours.
Ivan explained to Fudge in detail that he did not want to hand Peter over to the Ministry of Magic, as their mismanagement had caused Peter to escape. When the Aurors heard Ivan's methods of restraining Peter, they were secretly nervous and looked at Peter with pity. This was too cruel. Whether there would be any aftereffects from being repeatedly inflicted with the stunning spell in a short period of time was anyone's guess.
Well, is he Peter Pettigrew?
Fudge asked, looking expectantly at a tall, thin Auror. He was counting on the fact that Dumbledore had made a mistake, in which case he wouldn't have to worry about what happened next and Dumbledore's reputation would be ruined.
Yes, Minister, I've met Peter a few times and have some impression of him. I'm 80% sure this is Peter Pettigrew.
Chapter 439, The Powerful Fudge. No one, not even Fudge, doubted the authenticity of the dark mark, which made them shiver just looking at it.
I don't suppose I need to explain any further.
Yvonne asked.
Well, it's sort of clear now.
Fudge said indignantly, turning to the Aurors.
Take him and Black, and let's go back to the Ministry.
The Aurors nodded and roughly pulled the unconscious Pettigrew to his feet, freeing him from the ropes that bound him. Peter Pettigrew woke up from the stunning spell, only to see 2 Auror-clad wizards cuffing him and dragging him away.
Hold on, Cornelius. Are you going to take them all back to the Ministry?
Ivan interrupted.
They will, of course, remain in a special prison until the hearing.
Fudge said.
I don't think so.
Ivan shook his head. If Peter and Black were taken back to the Ministry, he would lose control of them completely. What's more, Sirius's escape from prison caused a lot of trouble for the Ministry, and who knows if Fudge will get angry and lynch him. Even though this was highly unlikely, Ivan had little trust in the Ministry and was more inclined to believe that things were under his control.
It is the duty of an Auror to take prisoners, Albus. Do you intend to stand between us and the law?
Fudge's eyes narrowed with disbelief and a hint of anticipation. Fudge waited for
Dumbledore
to say something which would give him a reason to arrest him.
Of course not, I just wanted to warn you, Cornelius. The whole wizarding community is very concerned about Peter's trial. It's best if nothing goes wrong.
Yvonne spoke gently, then continued.
The truth is that I have my doubts about the standards of the Ministry of Magic when it comes to policing prisoners, and even places like Azkaban are not guaranteed to be safe, so I suggest we move the prisoners to the observatory at Hogwarts, or perhaps we should have the Inquisitors supervise the proceedings.
Also, this is not just my opinion, but the result of my deliberations with the other members of the court, in case anything should go wrong before the official hearing.
Ivan emphasized. As an imposter, Ivan did not dare to confront Fudge head-on, as he was certain to reveal himself if he did, and even with the Elder Wand in his hand, he was no match for so many Aurors. As such, he had no choice but to press for the location of the prisoners to be changed to Hogwarts, or to allow the Aurors to enforce their laws. Fudge, however, was very forceful and did not hesitate to refuse. He didn't care what Ivan thought, as he saw it as a blatant challenge to his authority. The court's advice couldn't place any substantial restrictions on him.
You're mistaken, Cornelius. We're not enemies, are we? My earlier offer was just an added layer of insurance.
Fudge, though angry at Ivan for repeatedly challenging his authority, took the hint. As a politician, Fudge was quick to cast aside personal feelings and calculate profit and loss. He was now in trouble for two reasons. The first was that the Ministry of Magic had caught the wrong man, and Peter, the real murderer, had applied for the Order of Merlin. This incident had a strong impact on the credibility of the ministry, although it had little to do with him personally. Crucially, the Daily Prophet's report made it widely known that there was no way to hide the truth, and that there was little to go on other than passing the buck to one's predecessor. The second was that the Ministry of Magic went to great lengths to search for Sirius after he escaped, and even arranged for Dementors to surround Hogwarts. After all that effort, the results were unsatisfactory, and there was even a scandal involving Dementors attacking students and Ministry of Magic commissioners. He did not even hear about Sirius's case until this morning. In contrast to the former, he was personally involved in the matter, and if he did not handle it well, he would be accused of incompetence. If Dumbledore cooperated and proved that the Ministry of Magic's Aurors had put in a lot of effort into the investigation, rather than doing something pointless, then the matter would most likely be covered. Some thoughts passed through Fudge's mind, and after some thought, he relented and suggested that it might be possible to move Peter and Sirius to Hogwarts instead.
Ivan howls.
Fudge murmured, finding the name familiar. He looked at Dumbledore suspiciously, unsure why Dumbledore was doing this.
I thought you'd have some memory of him, considering how rare it is to find such a talented young wizard.
Ivan continued, looking at Fudge with regret.
He was also the one who discovered Peter's abnormality, so I think he deserves the glory.
Chapter 440, Ivan, Severus, how could you come to me and tell on me? Despite Fudge's exasperation, all Dumbledore needed was a nomination, and he had nothing to lose. As such, the support he received was genuine and allowed him to be less passive in the face of censure, and Fudge agreed without hesitation. After much discussion, the two agreed that Sirius Black and Peter Pettigrew would be held in custody at the Hogwarts Observatory, guarded by Aurors from the Ministry of Magic. Ivan was hoping to persuade Fudge to allow him to keep an eye on the ministry, but Fudge adamantly disagreed, hating the idea of anyone telling the ministry what to do. In order not to antagonize Fudge's sensitive sensibilities, Ivan decided to let it go for the time being. After all, the detention location was at Hogwarts, and it was up to him to decide whether or not to supervise. They soon arrived at an observatory at the top of the castle.
You two stay and watch them. The rest of you, come back to the ministry with me.
After tying up Black and Peter and locking them up in the observatory, Fudge pointed out two Aurors to guard and then hurried back to the ministry with the remaining Aurors. Due to the Daily Prophet's news, Minister for Magic Fudge had a lot on his plate today, and the only reason he had rushed to Hogwarts in the first place was out of sheer frustration, coupled with the fact that he wanted to confirm the truth of the matter.
By the way, where are the Dementors that surrounded Hogwarts?
Fudge asked one of the Aurors as he was about to step out of the gates.
Minister, the Dementors have been sent back in violation of Ministry of Magic regulations to attempt to attack students, and Madame Umbridge handed you a report on them.
She explained. Fudge nodded, remembering that he had indeed signed the document, and said,
Black and Peter are not to be taken lightly until the hearing, and you will go to Azkaban later and get some Dementors to assist with the guarding.
Fudge didn't want any more trouble at the Ministry of Magic, where he had enough on his plate, so fortification was of utmost importance. In addition, his decision to have Dementors assist the guards was not without punishment. Fudge was furious with Sirius and Peter Pettigrew for breaking out of prison. Fudge had nowhere to vent his pent-up anger at Hogwarts in the morning. He could not deal with Dumbledore, but he could make two prisoners suffer.
Send someone to get to the bottom of this tonight, and I want to see this report on my desk by tomorrow morning at the latest.
Fudge ordered before he left the grounds of Hogwarts Castle and used his transfiguration to disappear.
Finally done.
When Ivan returned to the headmaster's office, he was relieved to see Fudge and his students leaving Hogwarts. Now that the worst is over, all that's left is to wait for the trial to begin.
Help me deliver this to the Grand Captain of the Order of Merlin.
Ivan ordered as he shoved the envelope straight into Fox's mouth. Fox's body burst into white-hot flames, which splashed onto his fingers, startling Ivan, who was relieved that the flames had not harmed him.
Severus, is there something important you need to report?
Ivan asked, raising his eyebrows in surprise.
That's right, I think there's something you should know about our talented student, Ivan Howells.
Chapter 441, Ivan, we have to believe that Hars is a good comrade.
About me.
Ivan, momentarily stunned, looked at Snape strangely. It was the first time that he had ever been told off by someone while pretending to be Dumbledore.
What is it, Albus?
Snape asked, narrowing his eyes. He had a vague feeling that Dumbledore was acting strangely, and then he remembered that the password to the headmaster's office had not been changed in a long time, so he became suspicious. Ivan shook his head and said in a low voice,
No, nothing. I'm just curious about what the kid did this time. I need you to report to me.
Snape was silent for a while, studying.
Dumbledore.
But unable to see any flaws and unsure if he was being paranoid. Under normal circumstances, no one would dare to sit in the headmaster's office disguised as Dumbledore with Polyjuice Potion. Furthermore, Fawkes the Phoenix was hovering over Hogwarts this morning, and he had seen him holding Dumbledore's Elder Wand. With this in mind, Snape cast aside his doubts and recounted the events of the night before. In particular, the emphasis was placed on his conflict with Black and the others, which resulted in Ivan petrifying his body with a special ocular spell.
To tell you the truth, those eyes gave me a very bad feeling.
Snape still had a lingering fear as he recalled what had happened. He only met Ivan's eyes for an instant, and his body was petrified enough to affect his movements. He also felt death in that instant. If he had stared at Ivan for a moment longer, the consequences would have been unimaginable. Hearing Snape's words, Yvonne realized that her snake eyes had frightened him, and that was why he had come to complain. Ivan, however, was frustrated. He had worked so hard for this, and yet Snape was suspicious of him over such a small matter. Despite her thoughts, Yvonne did not forget who she was, so when she spoke again, it was in a different tone.
This is certainly cause for alarm, Severus.
Hales is full of mysteries, and sometimes even I can't get a handle on them.
Ivan said, trying to think of how Dumbledore might react. However, Ivan didn't seem to have any intention of attacking him, so he changed his tone, indicating that the power of magic could not be fully seen in one's lifetime. Harles has always been a good student and has done much for the peace of the wizarding community, and we should not be prejudiced against such a good student just because he is unique.
I'm just reminding you of that. If you really trust him that much, then so be it.
Snape added, remembering his business there. Dementors. Ivan frowned at this news, unsure what Fudge was up to. He had gone to a lot of trouble to get the Dementor out of the way, and now Fudge was trying to get it back. After the Daily Prophet reported the incident, he and Fudge had no further conflict regarding Sirius and Peter. Both sides needed to be assured of their safety until court, so Ivan was not too worried about Fudge's shady dealings. Snape fixed his gaze on
Dumbledore.
Who seemed to be lost in thought.
I hope you remember our agreement.
Ivan woke up with a start.
Of course, our agreement always stands.
He said, nodding cooperatively.
Good.
Snape stared at Ivan's face the whole time, seeing no hesitation or confusion on his face. Finally, he dismissed his doubts and left the headmaster's office. Ivan wiped the cold sweat from his forehead as he watched Snape disappear into the headmaster's office. He had not expected Snape to use this to test him. If he had not been a time traveler and understood that Dumbledore had promised Harry protection, he would have been seen through.
Ivan, did Professor Dumbledore say something to you? We saw Sirius being taken away by the Ministry.
Harry called out worriedly when he saw Ivan coming out of the headmaster's office.
Yeah, he's not going back to Azkaban, is he?
Ron asked, looking worried about the new pet Sirius had promised him. Yvonne opened her mouth to reply, but Hermione intervened.
I've analyzed the situation with you before, and I don't think so. Sirius has been cleared of all suspicion and will not return to Azkaban. My guess is that the Ministry has brought them back for questioning.
As she spoke, Hermione turned to Ivan for confirmation.
Right, Ivan. No, you're all wrong. Sirius and Peter are being held at Hogwarts.
Ivan exclaimed, shaking his head.
They're still at Hogwarts, really, where?
Harry's earlier worried look was gone, replaced by a look of excitement, as he couldn't wait to see how Sirius was doing.
Forgive me for not being able to tell you, Harry.
Ivan said, brutally rebuffing Harry's inquiry.
Sirius is being watched over by the Aurors of the Ministry of Magic, and will not be able to meet with you, so it would be best if you left him alone, lest you cause trouble for Professor Dumbledore.
Chapter 442. Isn't returning to Azkaban the same as going home? Harry and the others were disappointed, and Ivan refused to say anything, no matter how hard they tried. Given that there were still 2 or 3 days until the hearing, Ivan was worried that they would have too much time on their hands, so he decided to speak up.
Harry, if you're in the mood, you might as well think about how you're going to present your case in court. Your testimony is very important, and it may affect the outcome of the trial.
Reminded of this by Ivan, Harry became nervous, as he had never been to court before and had no idea what to do.
Why don't we go to the library and look up the court's procedures, as well as the major cases that have been recorded in the last 100 years?
Hermione suggested.
Good idea.
Harry nodded. With this in mind, Harry dragged Ron and Hermione to the library. Ivan, of course, did not follow, and declined Harry's invitation with an excuse that he had other things to do later. In fact, there was no such thing as being a witness. It was not like you were going to be a lawyer or give false testimony. The only reason Ivan had brought it up was to give Harry and the others something to occupy their attention. While he was thinking, Ivan sensed something and turned to look out of the window. The sky was gray and there were creatures moving in the clouds.
Dementors, are they that fast?
Yvonne immediately recalled Snape telling her about the Ministry's plans to send Dementors to assist the Aurors. Ivan had always distrusted such evil creatures and expected the Dementors to have any sort of self-control at all, so he planned to see what the Ministry was up to that evening. As night fell, dozens of caped figures floated around the top of an abandoned observatory atop Hogwarts Castle.
What else do you have to say, Peter Pettigrew? You still haven't told me exactly how you were discovered.
The Auror wrote down Peter Pettigrew's confession on a piece of parchment before continuing his questioning.
I really forgot. I don't remember anything. He used the memory charm on me and made me forget a lot of things.
Peter shook his head.
Someone put a memory charm on you. Who? Albus Dumbledore. Why would he do that to you? Because you knew something secret.
Aurors were suddenly very excited. He had been ordered to come here to find out what was going on, but it seemed that there was an unexpected bonus. He was well aware that Minister for Magic Fudge had recently been very unhappy with Dumbledore, and if Fudge could find something to use against Dumbledore, he might be able to gain the minister's favor.
No, not Dumbledore, it's Ivan Howells, the devil.
Peter replied, horrified. Whenever Peter thought about that experience, he felt a chill. He didn't know how much he had forgotten or if his memory had been altered.
Ivan Howells.
Aurors had a vague feeling he'd heard the name before, but couldn't place it. Sirius, who had been silent the whole time, suddenly said,
He was a very good young wizard, and it was he who found Peter's tracks.
Aurors frowned. It was illegal to use memory charms to erase or alter a wizard's memory. However, he did not say much about it, as the situation was special. The victim, Peter, was a criminal, and the other party had a reason to use the memory charm, so he only wrote it down on a piece of paper. After repeated questioning and confirmation that Peter had said everything he needed to say, the Auror turned to Black and spoke with anticipation.
Mr. Black, have you thought about my earlier suggestion? You expect me to tell everyone that I had a good time in Azkaban after the trial. That being locked in a cell is like going home.
Black scoffed.
I didn't ask you to say that, Mr. Black.
The Auror looked embarrassed. He understood that this was not very appropriate, but this was an order from above, and he could only try to negotiate.
If you cooperate with us, the Ministry will reward you handsomely when you are released. Compensation, you mean some galleons.
Sirius pursed his lips in disdain. He had no shortage of galleons, and the Ministry of Magic's attempt to buy him off with a few might have been a mistake. More crucially, Sirius looked down upon the Ministry's actions from the bottom of his heart.
I'll tell you the truth.
Seeing Sirius's stubbornness, Auror could no longer hold on to his dignity. In his opinion, the Ministry of Magic had already given him enough good faith, and he had even humbled himself to make a request, but the other party still did not appreciate his kindness. Thinking of this, the Auror could not help but threaten him.
Mr. Black, I urge you to reconsider. Going against the Ministry is not a wise choice. You have not cleared your name.
Chapter 443, Crazy Peter.
Very well, you will stay here with the Dementors for 2 days. Think about it.
Irritated by Sirius's refusal to listen to reason, the Auror glared at the pair, then stormed off.
Well, that's not bad. I haven't been around those creatures for a while.
Sirius said, watching the Aurors go. He had survived more than 10 years in Azkaban, so what was 1 or 2 days?
No.
Peter Pettigrew shouted tearfully. He lay on the ground without a backbone and wriggled his way towards the door. However, because his feet were tied to a chain, he could only struggle weakly on the ground. Before the Auror's arrival, he had known what it was like to be surrounded by Dementors. It was hell, as if all the good and joy had been forcibly removed from their minds, leaving only the ugliest and darkest memories.
Peter, you're disgusting. How could James, Lupin, and I have been so foolish as to befriend someone like you?
Sirius looked at Peter with disgust and spat.
Lupin.
Peter ignored him, murmuring to himself. After Sirius's reminder, Peter suddenly remembered something and shouted at the Aurors, who were already at the door.
Wait.
The Auror, who was about to leave, turned around and said impatiently.
Yes, I swear to you that I have never hidden anything from you about my years of hiding.
Peter hurriedly explained and then continued carefully.
What I'm trying to say has nothing to do with this, but it should be of some use to the Ministry, and if you could keep the Dementors away from me, I'll let you know. Enough of this nonsense, Peter. Do you think anyone will believe a filthy traitor like you?
Sirius snapped, realizing that Peter was likely about to reveal the identity of Lupin's werewolf wizard.
There's no harm in listening. If your information is useful, I'll consider making your life more comfortable.
The Auror looked at Peter with interest.
Of course, I'm sure you'll be very interested.
Peter said gallantly. He had a shrewd feeling from the other man's conversation with Sirius that the Ministry seemed to be out to get Dumbledore, and that Lupin's status would be a good place to start.
Hogwarts new anti-ah.
Just as Peter was about to betray his friends for glory again, a sharp pain shot from his waist to his mind. Peter's body jerked violently like a dead fish, and the words coming out of his mouth turned into a violent wail.
What's wrong?
The Auror pulled his wand out and pointed it nervously at Peter, not sure what he was up to.
Someone's here. The demon must have used a disillusionment charm to sneak in.
Peter looked around nervously. He had no proof, but he was certain that the young wizard was behind this.
Appear.
The Auror waved its wand dubiously. A ripple of magic spread from the tip of the wand to every corner of the room, but nothing happened.
There's nobody here,
exclaimed the Auror, looking at Peter with dangerous eyes.
Someone just used.
Peter stammered to explain, but he was keenly aware that something had slipped into his sleeve, and there was a sharp pain in his arm.
There's a bug in my shirt. It's biting me.
Peter was rolling around on the ground, screaming. The watching Aurors were baffled, unsure what he was up to.
Are you putting on a show, Peter? Or do you think by putting on an act, our Mr. Aura will kindly untie you?
Sirius scoffed. Peter, who had crashed into the wall, tried to retort, but someone stuffed a ball of smelly socks into his mouth, and he almost fainted from the smell.
Are you all right? If you need a medic, just let me know.
The Auror ventured, but Peter just kept squirming. The Auror, who did not receive a reply, frowned. Peter's strange behavior made him feel like he was being toyed with, so he did not bother with him anymore. As long as the other party was not dead, it did not matter to him how Peter was doing. Trapped and unable to speak, Peter watched as his only support left the observatory. A moment later, a young female voice sounded from the empty space beside Peter.
Harry, you took too many chances. What if you got caught?
Then what can I do? Do I have to watch Peter reveal Professor Lupin's identity?
Harry took off the invisibility cloak, revealing 3 young wizards in the empty observatory.
Sirius, are you all right?
Harry asked worriedly, turning to look at Sirius, who was tied up tightly.
Why are you here?
Sirius was surprised.
We saw a lot of Dementors hanging around earlier in the evening, so we figured you'd be here, since there's no one else in the school who needs watching over.
Hermione explained quickly.
Yes, we used the cloak of invisibility to sneak up. Luckily, the Dementors were far enough away not to sense us.
Harry nodded.
That's clever.
Sirius exclaimed, then looked at Peter, who was being tortured, and asked curiously.
What happened to his crazy look? How did you do it? No, we didn't do it, he just sort of snapped. I just poked him in the waist and told Ron to take off his socks and stuff them in his mouth.
Chapter 444, Gryffindor Triumvirate. Could someone else be here? Sirius looked around and saw no one, but it couldn't be Peter himself. As Sirius hesitates, the wind blows outside the window, and the biting cold is creeping in from all sides.
Why is it so cold all of a sudden?
Ron complained, shivering, and Sirius's face fell.
Oh no, the Dementors are coming, go.
Sirius urged Harry and the others.
But
Harry said hesitantly.
Don't mind me, I've been in Azkaban for over 10 years and I'm familiar with them.
Sirius pretended to be relaxed and waved them away. Harry tried to protest, but Hermione grabbed him by the arm and pulled him along as Ron grabbed the cloak of invisibility and threw it on top of them. However, they were too late, and a group of hungry Dementors had already floated up from the door.
Expecto Patronus.
Specks of light flashed at the tip of the wand, and a white mist of light burst forth. A huge silver creature charged out and knocked the approaching Dementors away with its prongs.
The Patronus.
Harry exclaimed as he watched the white blur of light and shadow chasing the Dementors through the air.
Jesus, Harry, you beat them.
Ron exclaimed in disbelief. If he remembered correctly, Harry had been knocked out of the sky by a Dementor a week earlier.
This is...
Hermione was equally shocked and looked at Harry in confusion.
It was after the Quidditch match that I went out of my way to learn it from Ivan.
Harry explained as he directed the Stag Guardian to knock back an approaching Dementor. Hermione pursed her lips, feeling a little jealous. She had asked Ivan about the Patronus charm because of her encounter with the Dementors, but he had put it on hold because he had been too busy recently. Snorting, the witch took out her wand and chanted an incantation, causing a white mist to waft out and block the Dementors from the other direction. Harry and the others were not the only ones to be attacked by the Dementors. Some of the more lazy monsters did not crowd around the Dementors, choosing instead to target the other 2 easier targets.
Get lost.
Peter seemed to have lost his mind under the barrage of attacks. He kept shouting crazy things, or perhaps the large number of Dementors reminded him of his time under Lord Voldemort 13 years ago. Sirius, who was surrounded by several Dementors, was not having an easy time of it either. He was frowning and occasionally looked pained. And more Dementors are pushing their way through the windows.
Why are you helping him? It would be better if he was killed by a Dementor.
Ron asked in confusion.
These Dementors are insane. What if they killed Peter?
Harry explained. As Harry put it, the already unregulated Dementors became violent and increasingly aggressive. Harry and the others felt like they were in deep trouble, and had no idea what to do.
The Dementors won't have the guts to do anything to me, but if you don't leave now, the aurors on guard down there will come up soon. Go.
Sirius shouted again. Harry nodded, gritted his teeth, summoned the stag patroness back, and led the way, leading Ron and Hermione out of the observatory. With dozens of Dementors closing in from all directions, Harry was mentally and physically exhausted from running around trying to keep his patroness alive. Luckily, Hermione also knew the patroness charm, and although she could not yet summon her patroness, she was able to take some of the pressure off of Harry, allowing him to hold on.
Who?
Seeing that his two good friends were so supportive, Ron also wanted to contribute and cast spells like them. However, such a high-level charm was not something that could be mastered in a short period of time, and no matter how hard Ron tried, the wand did not respond. Dementors drifted over from nowhere and slapped Ron's wand away, sending it rolling to the side.
No, my wand.